Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is August 1st, 2021. And today, hold on to your hats, sit at the edge of your seats. You're in store for one of those epic family Mormon Stories podcast interviews. Today, we are interviewing the Laing family. Hey, Laing family.
Hello.
Good morning.
How
Hello.
you guys doing?
Phenomenal.
Wonderful.
Good to be here with you, John.
So for those of you who don't know anything about the Laing family, which I'm sure is most of you, I'll just give you a quick high-level introduction. This is an epic Mormon story. It's going to be in multiple parts. It's going to be over multiple hours, but there's so much here. Kelly and Heather Laing are the parents of 4 children. They are, they have a traditional kind of story that you're all going to find compelling. You'll hear that Kelly and Heather have both served, lifelong callings in the church at significant levels of leadership, and that's all always interesting in its own right. Some of you who have followed Ex-Mormon Reddit will recognize their faces because occasionally they've posted photos of themselves as ex-Mormons on Ex-Mormon Reddit. Because they are friends with my dear friends, Jerry and Julie Johnson, who live up in Bremerton, Washington. For those of you who watched several years ago, my epic interview with Jerry and Julie Johnson and Doug and Lori Checketts, it was 2 couples, 2 sisters, and then 2 missionary companions who did this epic kind of 7+ hour Mormon Stories interview, which it goes down as one of my favorites. Jerry and Julie and Doug and Lori become dear friends. So they're connected to this story because all of these people live in the same kind of Bremerton, Washington ward. But a shout out to Jerry and Julie and all their family as well. But this is going to be an interview kind of in that same vein where we're interviewing multiple family members, and I'm really excited about that. I also am going to add that this is super interesting because Kelly is currently active duty military service. He serves in the U.S. Navy, and I won't get all his titles right kind of spontaneously, but he has commanded nuclear submarines. He is currently like the deputy commander of, I think, an entire naval fleet. He's going to introduce himself. I'm sure I'm getting it all wrong, right?
No, it's totally fine, John. Yeah. So first and foremost, the most important thing is I am the husband of this beautiful woman that sits next to me, my lifelong best friend. I'm also the father of 4 children, 2 gay children, 2 straight children. I am a returned missionary. Like you said, I've served in every calling you could imagine, like up till bishop. But more importantly, I'm now a lazy learner, an ex-Mormon. I was a submarine.
A little spicy.
That's right. I was a nuclear submarine captain, and right now I'm the deputy chief of staff for of nuclear weapons and strategic forces in the Pacific Northwest over all of the nuclear ballistic missile submarines. So there's a big disclaimer on that one that I'll go into here in a second. But at the end of the day, we're a family. We're just like anybody else. We have a life.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we'll come back to a couple disclaimers up front. But we've never really done active military service as a topic on Mormon Stories podcast. So that's going to be a thing we're going to be talking about. Didn't you were like underwater for 6 or 7 years of your life while married to Heather and raising young kids. And that's
correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, hats off to Heather, because over 25 years of military deployments and service, I've spent 6.5 years of my life underwater. And then that does not include the other deployments and travels and everything else that comes with the job. So she's done a lot on her own.
Yep.
She's pretty awesome.
Oh, shucks.
So that's its own cool part of the story. And then you've kind of already foreshadowed that they have at least 2 gay children. Because you never know. That what I've learned is you never know for sure.
Truth.
So at least 2 gay children, Britton and Mason, who have their own epic Mormon story. And it's the first time we've had 2 LGBTQ siblings, I think, interviewed at the same time on Mormon Stories podcast. But that's not rare. I have family, in my own family, there are several queer children, trans or queer children. I have extended family, same sort of situation. I think it's quite common in the LDS world to have multiple children where lots of children, and within the multiple children, there are several LGBTQ children. And Britton has an epic, Mormon story about how he was raised in the church, but then served a mission and struggled really hard on his mission as a gay Mormon missionary. And then that's its own important journey. And then, of course, what's it like to be a younger gay brother of an older gay brother, all of you being raised Mormon, and then to what extent do you have your own struggle, which was Mason's, and then what's it like to have an older brother in some ways take some bullets metaphorically and kind of pave the way. And then just kind of like what's it like to have, I don't want to call you an alpha male, but let's just say kind of a military type A personality, military dad who's Mormon, and you're trying to come out as gay, and what are the family dynamics like there? Lots of cool, epic components to this story. And so that's what you're in store for today. How does that sound?
Perfect.
That sums it up very nicely. And you're absolutely right, John. And I do fall into the alpha male normal category. And that's something that I'm working on breaking as I work through life and all these issues.
So and Mason, I noticed one of your outlines, I noticed, the topic of what is masculinity, the topic of toxic masculinity. I think that's important stuff for us all to be talking about. So really quickly, what we're going to do is we're going to interview Kelly and Heather first, up until the point where kind of Mason and Britton's story begins. Then we're going to excuse them, have Mason and Britton come and tell their full story. And then maybe at the end, we'll bring all four of them back to do a bit of a discussion. But this is going to be one of those epic multi-hour Mormon Stories interviews. Really quickly, before we excuse you, Mason and Britton, talking to the mics, is there anything you guys want to add at the intro, or did we kind of get it? Lean as close to the mics as you can.
Hi, Mason.
No, it sounded great to me. Yeah.
10 out of 10. Amazing.
Okay.
Perfect.
So thanks for coming, everyone.
Yeah.
All right, you guys are excused. And while you guys are walking back, we want to welcome, as our amazing co-host, Kara Burrell. Hey, Kara, how you doing?
John. Hey, Laing family. Oh my gosh. Was that not like the twists and turns of that introduction? I mean, we're going to cover so much today. I'm so excited.
We are too.
Oh my gosh.
Nervous, but excited.
Amazing. Yeah.
And Kara, you just spent the weekend at Sunstone, right?
I did. It was so good.
Yeah?
Yay. And I know it's probably a lot different this year since a lot of it was people online and in person and stuff. But Lindsay Hansen Park puts on an amazing symposium, and I had a stellar time. Super fun.
All right. Well, thanks for coming in on Sunday.
Right. Yeah. This is my worship right now, being with you people. I feel closer to my maker. I am so excited for this. The elevated emotion is already rising.
All right.
Let's get started.
Well, it's great to have you. Okay. Well, without any further ado, let's jump into this epic Mormon story. So, Kelly and Heather, where should we begin?
I think we start with Heather.
Oh, disclaimers.
Oh, that's a
yeah.
good one.
Yeah.
You
All right,
first.
Both
so
of you
first-
have some disclaimers, right?
Well,
Mine's a legal disclaimer first off.
All right,
so.
let's start
Go
there.
right.
So I am active duty Navy still. And so my views that are expressed here are my opinions and my opinions only. They do not reflect the opinions of the United States Navy or the Department of Defense. What I'm going to speak about are personal to my life. Now, with that interwoven, there will be several military experiences. Obviously, I can't reveal anything that's classified, top secret, but there will be things that I will talk about that are integral to our story, especially with the deployment of nuclear submarines and the life that we've lived through this military time. But I just want to be very clear up front. I do have permission from the Navy to do this. I've vetted this through legal means because at the same time, I've also received a little bit of retaliation as I've walked away from the church in this last year. So I just want to state that openly and publicly. And then the second thing is, disclaimer is as our children are interviewed, we have given our consent to them to talk about anything that they want openly and honestly, and to have John ask them and talk to them about anything that they are willing to talk about. Any moral issues, sexual issues, any personal, private, whatever it may be, it is their story, and we give our consent 100%.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
I love it. We're big fans of informed consent here on Mormon
Yes,
Stories
we are.
podcast. and then we talked about this a little bit beforehand, because there's going to be a heavy focus on active military service. we're sensitive to always kind of trying to keep the conversation balanced between all the participants. But because some of this is going to really focus on Kelly's military service, there's likely going to be an imbalance, at least in this part of the story, between what Kelly shares and what Heather shares. Heather, did you want to address that at all?
Yeah, I would love to. In the past, I'd say 6 months, I've kind of come to a realization. I'm a naturally very shy person, and I don't usually share very often with people unless I really know them. And so I think when people look in on us and like just observe our relationship, that I've seen that people tend to maybe assume that Kelly is very domineering and he's the one that takes charge, I'm subservient or whatever, all those nasty words I think there. And experience I've just had recently is somebody saying something like that was close to me, and it was kind of shocked me. And I felt very insulted that even though I'm not a sharer, I'm quiet, that somebody would think that I'm so shallow that I would just let my husband, and he's the only one that does things. So I just want to get that out there, that it may be more heavy on Kelly, but that's my personality. I have my own opinions, I have my things, and I will share them when I feel to do so, but he's definitely not domineering. We always kind of joke that I'm the boss at home, so, but I just wanted to put that out there too.
Perfect.
So.
I think it's important too. We have a very informed consent relationship where we talk about everything open.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those things where, privately and personally, I take a ton of advice from her. And I wish everybody had a Heather in their life to where they could have that kind of open, honest dialogue. And it's like I've told a lot of people, a true friend tells you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear. And Heather, she tells me what I need to hear. And she tells me often, but she tells me in a way that helps me want to be better.
I love it. Okay. Well, let's jump in then. And I'm just so grateful you guys, and you guys flew your whole family here. I mean, you have other family here, but I'm just really grateful you'd fly all the way from Bremerton to do this interview.
Thank you.
So.
John, it is a pleasure to be here, and we would
Absolutely.
have broke China to come here. It's unfortunately I have to work tomorrow, but it's one of those things where you and your work, Kara's work, and so many that went before us. Shout out to Julie and Jerry Johnson, who they'll come into the story. We're a pinnacle part of our story in our lives and helping us to understand some things. So it's one of those things where I would say a year ago when we left, and we'll get into that, there's no way I would have come onto Mormon Stories. But the more I've learned and the more I've realized how much others helped me, we realized together that we needed to tell our story. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I have loved this. I am so grateful for Mormon Stories and other things like that, because what it is like, it's a support group. It helps you to sometimes know that you're not crazy. You're not the only one feeling the way you feel. And it kind of confirms to you and helps you. It's just been such a big help to both of us. So.
Yes.
All right.
The last thing I'll put on to that is over the course of this last year, I'm a huge audiophile, listen to music when I work out. Over this last year, the music's pretty much gone away and it's gone to podcasts. And so I've listened to almost every podcast you put out and many others. So thank
Beautiful.
you.
Awesome.
I think it's also useful to get out front what our intentions are, because
Absolutely.
when you're an Orthodox Mormon, it's like, unless you don't talk publicly about the church, and if you do, you only say nice things. And so you really can't be open and honest, let alone critical of the church from an Orthodox Mormon's point of view, without feeling like you hate the church or you want to tear it down or you want to take people out of the church. And there's always going to be extended family members and friends and leaders that are going to maybe be mentioned even not by name and feel like, well, they're just bitter, they're just angry, they're just haters, or they want to destroy everything. So do you guys want to talk about your intentions for why you're doing this interview up front, just to kind of get that out of the way of why you're not doing it and why you are doing it? I'd
say for me, the reason why I'm doing it is that it was so important to me, even though I am shy and this is very nerve-wracking and scary to me. I just want to tell my own story. I don't hate the church. I'm grateful for the values it taught me. I'm grateful for that. And I love my family and friends that are still members of the church. And I would never want to take what is good for them away from them. But I wanted to share my story and the feelings I've had from living in that religion my whole life, and then the things that I've learned and how it's made me feel, and just to get it out there for I guess because I'm not usually vocal, I just want to let my story be known.
Yeah, tell your story. That's fair.
That is huge for me to have her tell her story too, because of that perception that she talked about earlier. For me, it's everything that you just articulated, where so many of the people that we've talked to that are still in the faith, they come to us and they talk to us. They don't want to know the story. They don't want to know the whys. They don't want to know the details. And there's generally labels that are placed upon you. You want to sin, or you just got tired, or you just whatever it is, fill in the blank. But the truth of the matter is most people don't want to engage. They're still active because the blinders are on, because they assume that you've come across anti-Mormon material. They assume, and therefore by assuming, they want to bin you and they want to classify you and then push you away. This is our way of also putting our story out in a safe place, which allows us to then, we will post it, and allow our family members, our friends, to also then privately, which we know they will, and personally understand our story, whether it's now, whether it's a year from now, or whether it's 10 years from now. And so I think that's very important for us.
Yeah. There's probably also an LGBTQ advocacy component to this, right?
Very big.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll speak to that.
It's just really interesting to me when I've opened my aperture of the world and thinking to how close to my heart it is LGBTQ issues are, especially you met our two boys. And I just want to share with the whole world how precious we all are and how we think and how the freedom that we should all have to love and to be who we want to be, and how just innately we're all just humans. We're all the same, and we all should be able to give that privilege to be who we are fully and have that time and that to grow and to learn and to make mistakes and then to pick up and keep going and not to be put in a box and say, this is where you need to be. Do not remove yourself from that box. I'm big on boxes lately and I do not like them. And I don't think anybody needs to be put in a box.
Also, the stakes are high, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, the stakes are very, very high. And we're not just talking emotions, we're talking lives.
Sorry, I just wanted to share one quick story about when you said the stakes are high. Recently, we've had somebody in our previous stake where we live now, and say some things and post some things and message us and our son and stuff. Some pretty inflammatory, very judgmental things about LGBTQ and religion and stuff, and very hurtful. And I'm usually quiet. Kelly's the one that engages. He says those things, and I don't usually engage, but I felt I needed to at least say something, even though I didn't think it was going to change her mind or her opinion. But I wanted her at least to say to her that the way she was acting, luckily for my son, he's in a place in his life right now where he can get over it. He can move on. He is in a place, but the way she is acting, there's going to be somebody that she interacts with that same way, and they're not going to be in that place that my son was in. And the damage that she could have done, even with a life, is so huge to be that way. And you could cause somebody to commit suicide, and that's a very, very real thing in acting and saying the things that she has said. So
that old adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, couldn't be more wrong.
true.
The fact is everybody has human emotions and everybody has a life. And those comments dig deep. And depending on where somebody's at in a mental state, it can be not only life-threatening, it can actually be what trips somebody to take that. And we'll get into that in our story. But with that individual, we re-engaged, and both my son re-engaged with her, and he was so kind and so loving. I re-engaged. And at the end of the conversation, I simply left it, it's this. There is going to come a day, because she has 8 children, I believe, and I won't identify the person by name, that one of your children statistically will be LGBTQ.
If not two.
If not two. And when that day comes, I want you to know that your child is safe in our hearts and our homes, and we'll be there ready to receive them and love them. And that's with no guile. We really mean that.
And so the broader message around LGBTQ advocacy is what?
Please, please.
be kind.
Be kind.
Be careful, be kind.
Careful, be kind. There's so
Be
much
quiet
out there.
over be rude,
Right.
right? Or hurtful.
We all have thoughts, and we all we all naturally as humans, we make judgments and assumptions and we think those. That's just who we are. We do that. That's how we navigate this world that we live in. But don't share them if you don't need to. There's so many things that you just should keep in your head that you can have those. That's part of being, but don't share them. Don't make those judgments that can hurt people like that.
Listen,
And say them.
you did a TED talk that I listened to years ago. You did it, and it talked about becoming an ally. I grew up in a society and an environment in the 80s and 90s where, everything was homophobic, and especially inside the church. I couldn't have been more wrong. And it took some seminal events in my life to start to listen, to start to open my eyes, as you talked about. And when I started to listen, when I started to understand, and we talked together, we chose to become allies, even though we didn't necessarily know that our children were gay at the time, but choose to become an ally, even if you don't understand. Because believe me, on the scale of, gay to straight, if this is gay and this is straight, all right, my son's maybe here, I'm on the farther end of the straight side. I don't understand it completely, but I understand the need to be loved. I understand them, and I love them.
Yeah, and probably the largest known factor for all the indicators of health, of risky drug use, of risky sexual behavior, and of suicide attempts, the probably the largest determinant is family support, family acceptance. And so I think a larger goal we have here is to model mistakes, but also attempts at family acceptance, so that we can prevent harm, future harm, right?
Absolutely.
And this is an example of a family that's made that transition from a family that didn't understand to a family that's working hard to be understanding. And we hope that helps prevent further harm in the future with your family and with your loved ones. Fair?
Absolutely.
That's absolutely
Very
fair.
much.
Okay. Longest introduction and set of disclaimers ever.
So wordy usually.
And now let's, Carrie, anything you want to add?
No, I thought everything you said was really beautiful. And I hope people are like extra on the edge of their seats, because now we're going to get into everything. So that was really good.
All right. Well, let's jump in. Where do we start?
You want to start with where you grew up and family and stuff?
Sure. All right. I'll just start. I always hated these introductions, like in college or whatever. Hi, I'm Heather. I like to read. So I grew up in Idaho Falls, Idaho, predominantly. We moved a few places before first grade, but the majority was in Idaho Falls, Idaho. I'm the oldest of 4 children. My dad, his profession was a meat cutter. He worked for the same company as a meat cutter for 30 years in Albertsons. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I had a great childhood. And I still have great parents that love me. And we've always been members. I was born into the Mormon church. And I would have to say, I don't know, my upbringing, I went to church every Sunday. I went to youth activities all throughout. My dad, working, his schedule was always different, and many Sundays he worked, and so he wouldn't go with us to church. And as I got older, I kind of heard the whisperings of like people saying he was inactive or something, but I never thought that in my mind, because whenever he was home, he would go with us, and and my mom always got us there, and we didn't really have family evening or scripture study. We weren't that kind of family, but I was taught the values of that. I was taught, all the basics and stuff, and we lived it. We went to church. I wouldn't have dared. I was a very good girl that would not have dared do something that out of that realm of Mormondom, I guess is what I call. I don't know what I'm trying to think. My parents, they're not scriptorians or not anything like that, but they're good people. They were, my family, both parents were very service oriented. I grew up with my mom and dad. grandparents lived close, both of us, and both of them, and we would always go visit them. They were always doing things for my grandparents, helping them. Their siblings lived close, and if they needed something, they would always go help. They would serve people in our ward. Anybody need help, and then my dad worked like non-members, anything. He would go out help them with whatever they needed, and I was always used to that. At one time, my parents, as a joint couple, they visiting taught like 20 widows in our ward. We grew up in a ward with an older generation, and so there were many, many older couples and then widows, and my parents just took over the 20 widows and would love them, serve them, anything they needed, always, every month. They were constant with them. And they still, to this day, they're constantly serving everybody around them. And so I grew up in that kind of atmosphere.
Do you want to talk about your uncle?
Oh, I do have an uncle on my dad's side. He's the youngest of 6 siblings, and that was gay. And
in Idaho Falls?
Blackfoot, Idaho is where they're from.
That's even more intense.
Yeah. So, and I look back on it now, and it was just, it was what it was. I never really thought about it being, I mean, I don't know if I even really exactly knew what it was when I was younger, what it meant, but my dad never treated him different. My family members, it was just his brother and
Really?
stuff. No, I never saw that. I never saw any like feelings of difference with any of my mom's side and dad's side. But so my uncle, he actually contracted AIDS and died.
Wait, around what year, if you remember?
It was in the 80s. So I'm trying to think what I remember. My grandparents, he lived in Salt Lake. My uncle did, moved to Salt Lake, and that's where he lived. And then he got sick, and my grandparents went to his apartment in Salt Lake and lived with him for 6 months and took care of him before he passed away. I never felt any judgment or any less than, and they were active members of the church.
Wow.
I never felt that. And so I grew up with that. So on my dad's side, I'd say about half and half, like active members, half active, half not. There's 6 children. And then my mom's side, same, there's 6 children, and I'd say 2, counting my mom, are active, and the rest are. And I grew up like that. So all my many aunts and uncles, they did not live the way that we did. They drank or smoked or swore, and, do all those things. But we always had family reunions and always got together, and there was complete love and acceptance on my parents' part for all their siblings. And so I was very
family before beliefs, man. That's so inspiring.
I feel like, because I kind of look at myself more nuanced in the religion than some, and I think that's where it came from, is just family and love and over that kind of stuff. Like, it'll all be worked out. Like in my mind, I always thought, family's family, so it's all going to be worked out in the end, and because they're your family and you love them. So
I love that.
But
And I have no idea how that happens in freaking Idaho Falls.
I don't know. Yeah, Blackfoot, right? Idaho Falls. Yeah. They were pretty amazing. They still are. My family is. So
That's beautiful. Okay. Really quickly, like, people probably don't have any idea what Idaho Falls is like, and being a Mormon in Idaho Falls. And then I do want to hear about kind of your high school years, your faith development. So, did you do seminary? Anything you want to share about just being a Mormon teen, and what people should think about when they think about growing up as a Mormon teen in Idaho Falls in the 80s?
That's
Was
true.
it, were you a teen in the
80s, 90s.
Okay,
I graduated
80s,
in 93.
Okay.
I would say more Idaho Falls is definitely predominantly Mormon.
Like 80%, you think?
I'd say, yeah, definitely.
Especially when we grew up.
Yeah, especially then. We lived, like where we lived, it was like our ward was like a 4x4 block radius. Mm-hmm. So it was just like a tiny little space with different wards, different congregations. It was constant. So in my high school, I knew a few non-Mormons, and none were my close, I'd have to say. My sister had one close friend. She's a couple years younger than me that wasn't, and that was rare, right? Because it just was predominantly, that's what it was. And so it's just kind of a way of life around there.
I'm guessing not a lot of people of color.
No, I had one teacher in my high school, and she was amazing. She was like an English teacher. I took I loved to read, and I took a novel class from her. Her children went there too, and I had one.
She was a person of color?
Yes, she was, and then I had one person in my grade school. One, I know it's like a whole non-diverse.
Super white.
I have to tell you a funny, like I don't know if it's a funny story, but yeah, super. I grew up super white. We went to school in Utah. Kelly, when he joined the Navy, we drove. So he was already in Florida doing a school. I drove down with my parents. Drove me down to Pensacola, Florida. We were driving. We got to Mississippi and we went to McDonald's and we look around and we were the only white people there. And I remember that was the first time anything is just like, oh, okay. And I mean, I don't even remember my feelings. It was just like an observation that I made. And then of course our military career, we were in the South for a lot of it, but yeah, definitely. We were not a diverse a diverse city state. My high school years, like I had said before, I was super shy, but I had good friends. We had a group of us in high school. There were 7 of us, and we are still friends to this day. My spirituality, I went to seminary, but it was not like my poor kids who had to get up super early. It was release time seminaries.
Integrated into the
exactly.
high school schedule.
Yep.
Right?
Walked across the street to go to it was like either first through 6 periods, depending which one
I
I
still
got.
don't know how the church gets away with that.
I have no clue. Like,
Especially not in Utah.
So, yeah, absolutely. So it wasn't a struggle. It was fun. I had, seminary teachers made it fun. Everybody else did it too, sort of thing. So I did seminary. I went to all my activities. I loved church activities. It was kind of a social life sort of thing. And the boy that I liked was in my ward forever. Yeah, there wasn't that one mother boy. It was just my whole world, my whole social construct was the church. And so, but like I said, my family was not, I look how we raised our family but it was not like scripture study every morning or every night. It wasn't Neil Dancy family prayers. It wasn't family evening on Monday nights. We did things together and did stuff, but it wasn't strict like that. But I did all the Mormon things. I did everything, and it was my world. So, any
instances of like shame or guilt in high school years? I always ask that just because it's such a predominant theme.
There isn't one that stands out to me, but I was a very good girl. Like I wouldn't have.
I mean, in quotes, I hope you're saying that in air quotes.
No, yeah, like
Mormon standards,
good by good, and absolutely in quotes, like what they would like label as, yeah. I listened to the lessons. My parents didn't like preach, like wear modest clothes, wear things like that, but I just did, and I never thought about like being with a boy or doing any things like petting or anything like that. I was like, oh, that's making out. I mean, we did make out, but I mean, before Kelly, but anything past that, I just would never like any having sex before marriage or anything like that. I just knew that I couldn't do that and stuff. And
alcohol, drugs?
No, not even thought. And the thing is, I was like, I look at my high school years and I just wasn't, I guess, friends with the right people. I wouldn't have even known where to get like drugs or alcohol. Britton's laughing at me over there. I wouldn't have. I was so innocent, super innocent, and I had never.
So no smoking, no drugs, no coffee, nothing. No tea.
No, definitely no coffee. I remember this one time. This is how, like, so boring. You got the sample in the mail of like International Cafe, like cappuccino, like instant mix, and I love the smell of coffee. I always have loved that. I'm like, oh, that tastes so good, and I'm like, I'm like, no, I will not do that. And I like remember throwing it away. I mean, just things like that. My parents didn't drive it. I just was naturally like, I was just going to do that. So
I have to make the joke. I was reading in your notes and it was like, I didn't want to do any of the really bad things like sex, murder, or coffee.
I know, really. If I know, right? Like those things that were drilled into your head growing up, do not drink coffee, do not smoke,
Do not
and
murder
then,
people.
don't murder anybody either. So
And overall, I get the sense that you were super happy. Like this was a happy, kind of idyllic Mormon upbringing, and just upbringing.
For me,
period.
it was. My parents were super, like I said, low key. They weren't judgmental. They just kind of trusted. And I mean, obviously, I didn't ever break their trust because of just who I was, but they just trusted that I was just gonna do it. I was just gonna be okay, and they gave me that, and they did. They loved me, and I always felt that love from them. So.
Okay.
Did you have like any spiritual experiences that you felt tied you to the church as a teen?
Do you know what? I didn't. Oh, I remember one time my mom, and I don't know if it was a spiritual experience because they didn't preach to me, but my mom would like do things by example, I guess. So one time she watched, I remember the movie, it was like Ghost. And
I remember that.
And there was like this scene.
The clay scene.
Yes,
right?
the clay scene. And I remember she didn't really talk
pottery.
about this.
Yes,
She
the phallic
just
pottery.
Yeah, she had mentioned, she's like,
Patrick Swayze's dead, right? Patrick Swayze's
right, Patrick
dead.
Swayze's
Who's the
dead.
woman?
Demi Moore.
Demi Moore's the woman.
And-
She's like molding the clay and thinking
And I
about
even
her
can't
dead.
even, I don't even know if I've seen like bits of it, right? But
Super erotic.
yeah. And so she had mentioned it, and she doesn't usually, she's funny like that. So I must have had it in my head that she had mentioned, this movie, I don't know if it's very good. And then, so I went to a friend's house in high school, and they were going to watch that movie. They're like, we're going to watch Ghost. And I'm like, oh, I should not watch that movie. And I was super shy, like I said, but I said, I
Your
don't
sons are
really
laughing right
think
now.
I know. I don't really think I should watch that movie. And they're like, okay. I mean, now I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh. But they're like, okay. So I'm like, I'm just gonna call my mom. And so I called her, and she like came and got me. But just like in passing, I would just listen, and I'm like, oh, that's probably not good for me, and I would just do it. So I'm a natural do-gooder, I guess.
She is. Totally.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I remember that movie because it's the first movie I saw getting off my mission.
Okay.
So I think it was 1990.
Yeah, that would have been right
and I
there.
remember
My sophomore
thinking
year.
the world has gone to hell. Like the world has become truly wicked, because of Demi Moore and the clay.
That's what my mom thought too.
Patrick
Obviously.
Swayze as a ghost is behind her, and she's stroking the clay. It's very erotic
Oh boy.
and evil.
Yeah. So that really, I mean, I didn't like, they would talk about, here's one thing. People would talk about feeling the spirit and having it tell you, like you praying and like letting the spirit tell you a path you should take or prompting you to do something. And I remember hearing those lessons and thinking, ooh, I wonder if there's something wrong with me. Like, in passing.
Why?
I wonder, because I don't think I've ever had that. And I would say that to myself. I'm like, I don't know. Am I doing something wrong? I'm doing what I'm supposed to, I think. But I thought there was something wrong with me. And then I'm a really great at like thinking a thought that maybe makes me feel bad. And then I'm really good at being like, meh, and like pushing it down and and forgetting it properly. So that's what I would do. I'd be like, no, I'm fine. And I'd like push the thought down and I would move on. So
I love it.
but yeah, but just things like that every so often. I wasn't like a super, like people would like cry. I'm not a crier. And so people would like testimony meetings, like start crying. I'm like, am I supposed to be crying? And I would like question myself because I wasn't crying at things everybody else was. But I do feel things very intensely, but I just don't show it so much, I guess. So, but I thought something was wrong with me because I didn't feel the spirit the way people described it. So,
I relate to that.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to share before we jump to Kelly's intro?
That I can think of.
While you look, I'm going to just add one point on her. She talked about her dad and her mom. I will just want to reemphasize, through this whole process, her mom and dad have stayed consistent with that. I know it's hard on them, but that's a couple that has served and given to people beyond anything that could ever be expected. Her dad served as a bishop years later on. And we'll talk about that. But and some of the critiques from my family about her family, because they weren't as active or as goody Mormon as should have been or could have been.
You're saying that in air quotes too.
Yeah, yes, absolutely in air
Yes.
quotes.
With a little roll of the eyes.
Yes.
underneath there.
Oh, no, a huge roll of the eyes.
I mean, it sounds like a model Mormon family just in terms of putting family over Mormonism. And if Mormonism is incorporated, it's the savoring, it's like the salt, but it's not, you're not living to be Mormon. You're living, and Mormonism informs how you're living, but it's putting people and lives and family first. And when that magic formula happens, it's a beautiful thing. I'm just going to admit that.
And I feel like that's what I had.
I love that.
Which is just opposite from what my family.
Okay, so now it's time for you, Kelly.
Okay, so with that, I grew up in a very strict, very orthodox, extremely orthodox Mormon community and Mormon home. So I came from some Mormon stock, but most of it was not. My parents came from Wyoming, and it came from a situation where my grandfather, he was a cowboy, literally converted while he was a cowboy. My grandmother, she was extremely strict. My grandfather on my dad's side was the kindest, most just gentleman you'd know. But I don't think he was ever truly
Converted.
completely TBM. I mean, we'd go to see my grandpa. And,
What does TBM mean for those who don't?
true believing Mormon or true blue Mormon, depending on who you're talking to. I mean, we'd go and he loved the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Roger Staubach.
That's
Gifford
exactly those years.
Nielsen, Danny White.
But even more than Danny White and Roger Staubach, he loved the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders.
Ooh. Okay.
And my brothers and I would always laugh when the cheerleaders would come on, and my grandpa would sit up and pay attention. Ooh, make a few comments here and there, and then
That was almost like the equivalent of porn in those days,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Almost.
Pre-internet, right?
totally. I mean, I think he had to go to a state president for that one. But my grandfather, John Laing, was a god amongst mortals as far as just kindness. But he also lived in an environment where he couldn't speak up or say much, and just kind of went along is what I truly believe. And a lot of my siblings believe the same thing.
He couldn't speak out about what, or if he might have,
I don't think that he was all in like everybody else.
in terms of buying it all, believing the
it all.
Mormon narrative.
Exactly. Case in point, he was converted, well before they got married. Him and my grandmother got married. And it was when my father was 12 years old as a new deacon. They're in Lovell, Wyoming. And all the boys, it was after the priesthood meeting, all the boys are kind of standing around talking, and they were one-upping each other about, well, my dad's better because he can do this. My dad's stronger because he can do this. And then he says, my dad wants to jump in as a brand new deacon and says, oh yeah, well, my dad's better because he can chug a lug of beer faster than any of your dads can. And all the parents were standing right there, and the bishop was standing next to my grandfather. And my grandfather kind of looked back, and that was the last beer we know of that he had until, well, that was the last one we know he had, but a request later on that we'll talk about later.
It has to be over the years that there have always been non-believers that were in it, that were acting the role,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
physically and mentally out. I mean, that has to.
Has
people
to.
aren't dumb 100 years ago just because they live 100 years ago or 50 years ago.
Exactly.
But they were silent because it's be silent or you don't survive.
And I guess to that
So
point,
they've always been with us, right?
exactly. It was on his deathbed, and the person that was taking care of him was my mom, his daughter-in-law, that he said, the only thing I want in this world right now is a cold beer. And I had never, and that was years back, but I think now, dang, I wish I could have given him a cold beer.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But coming back
Since
to
Joseph had beer, right?
that's right. Many times. Even we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
But I did grow up in a very, very strong Mormon Orthodox home. There were 8 children, 7 boys, 1 girl. I'm number 5 of 8. So I literally fall into middle child syndrome, and Heather will contest this, I was the forgotten child. And Heather knows that. And she
Makes me sad.
I left at stores, from several times between the ages of 4 and 8. I remember one time I was 5, I left at Grand Central, and we went shopping in the morning, and I went wandering off just as some 5-year-old did, and all of a sudden I found myself alone. And it wasn't until later I couldn't find my parents, my mom, and my brothers, and went looking and looking. And the time passed, and it got dark outside. And I remember my sister worked across the street at the movie theater. So I think it was about 7 o'clock at night. So probably about 8 hours. I hid inside the store looking for my mom, and walked across a busy intersection to the movie theater because I knew my sister worked there. and asked if my sister was working there. She wasn't, but fortunately some good people called my family and they came and picked me up. They didn't know I was gone. That was my childhood in essence.
Yeah.
Because they just couldn't keep track of.
8 kids. I mean,
Yeah.
and my mom was overwhelmed, especially 7 boys. And we were, my father is one of has a very strong opinion and we're all kind of adventurous. I feel bad for my mom to this day. God bless her soul. For raising 7 boys and 1 girl. And my sister, she's not a weakling by any means. She's a very smart, intellectual. She's a registered nurse. She's an incredible woman. We've had a falling out since, but that's part of a later part of the story. But growing up in our home, my dad, he was a Marine.
Really?
He was.
Okay.
He went and right after.
Are they called jarheads? What are
Jarheads, they were. and I was a jarhead for a little while.
Was he enlisted?
He was officer.
Oh, your dad was?
My dad.
In Wyoming?
No, well, they left Wyoming because right after he graduated high school, he wanted to become a pilot. An uncle kind of put this in on him. And so as he started looking into this idea and Vietnam spinning up, he actually went to Utah State, got his degree from Utah State, and then got into a program with the Marine Corps where they picked him up as an officer, graduated college, went to officer candidate school, went to flight school, and then he went and served in Vietnam. He actually flew the vice president around at the time, Vice President Agnew.
Spiro.
Spiro, thank you.
No. That was just me trying to sound intelligent.
I think it's Agnew.
Yeah, Spiro Agnew. Yeah.
but
Richard
he's-
Nixon's vice president.
That's right.
Yeah.
He, like I said, toured in Vietnam. My brother, that's the 3rd oldest, he was born while my dad was in Vietnam. But very, very militaristic, loves the Corps. And even to this day, he is all about the Corps. And so that was seeing that. And if you had anybody who knows a Marine Corps officer, they bring that not only to their business and their work, but they bring it home too. And my dad, we all knew he was a Marine his entire life. And we all knew who was in charge. My dad was in charge. And he was the absolute alpha dominant male.
Okay.
But what's interesting is this, there's a lot about my father that I'll talk about, and he's still alive. But he ended up leaving the Marine Corps, never served a mission. Yeah. My son just gave a gasp. He never served a mission, but he expected all of his boys to. Never served a mission and felt guilty for it. When he left the Marine Corps, he went and applied for the church education system and became a seminary teacher for the seminaries.
Really?
Yes.
Full-time seminary teacher. Got accepted. In fact, the person that actually set him apart in final interview was Boyd K. Packer, which, yes, get there.
Okay.
So my father then became a seminary teacher, and his first place that he was stationed as a seminary teacher was in Rexburg, Idaho. And the church education system will move the seminary teachers around based on their needs, personalities, demographics. They do have a rotation. And so I grew up, and I was born in Rexburg, Idaho. We moved literally within hours of the flood. Moved to Arco, Idaho. And the flood hit just after we got to Arco.
For those who don't know what the flood is.
So the flood, the Teton Dam broke back in the 70s in Rexburg, Idaho, just above Rexburg, and flooded out the town. It was absolutely horrific what that flood did. But also what it did, it was really neat, the Mormon response that came up. Great stories that come out of that. But at the same time, we had just moved to Arco, Idaho, and fortunately escaped that disaster. Lived in Arco for a couple of years. My dad taught seminary there. We moved to Pocatello. I grew up until I was just finishing 6th grade in Pocatello, Idaho. Once again, very orthodox Mormon household where the rules were the rules, the line was the line. You do not speak against the prophet. You do not question the prophet. You read the scriptures. You pray before every meal. You go to church. You do not joke around in church. I remember the hand to the back of the head several times in the ring, because my brothers and I would be sitting on the bench and we'd be laughing and snickering and poking each other back and forth. And my dad was very, very strict. But with strictness comes also the human nature to push back. And 7 boys, we pushed back.
The stories.
What do you mean?
So each one of us has our different level of degree of rebelliousness. I have 2 brothers that were pretty rebellious. Myself, I was kind of in the middle. But one brother, he drank all through junior high school, did the drugs, would have the sex, he played football, really had a hard time with the whole Mormon thing. He ended up going on a mission at one point and coming home halfway through that mission. Well, I say coming home. He'd left the mission. His story is very key. I want to get to that one later. But he had the shenanigans and the antics that he pulled. They're epic. Some involvement with the law and things like that. But he's of all of our family and all the brothers and sisters, he's the one that has the most personality. And that brother, in fact, he won't mind that I mention his name, Dan. Dan is just larger than life. Lives in Tennessee now. He's had a small cattle ranch that he's owned. Manual labor, construction labor. He's foreman now. Does some incredible work. But one of the kindest hearts you'll never meet. But he has a rebellious streak in him. And my father could not handle that rebellious streak. My next brother that was just next to him had kind of a rebellious streak too. But he was also the jock. He was the football star, the wrestling star, state. He had it all. In fact, all the girls wanted my brother Joe. And those that will be listening to this that know Joe and everybody, he's fine with me mentioning his name. They know that Joe had it all. But he also knows, people know that Joe and my dad did not get along. Joe, at the age of 16, was kicked out of the home by my father. Now, my father will say, oh, no, he left voluntarily. No, he was kicked out at the age of 16 and went and lived with his football coach. Because if you're not going to abide by my rules, you can't live under my roof.
Mm-hmm. Strict.
Very,
Oh, yeah.
very
I mean,
strict.
I was just noting that a Marine background and then Rexburg, Idaho and CES, that's a lot of intense culture.
Extremely tense. So, so those that understand the Ezra Taft Benson years, the Bruce R. McConkie years, and the Neil A. Maxwell years, those were my father's idols.
Describe a little bit about what that means.
So there were some very hard orthodox apostles throughout the years that just, you toe the letter, it's the letter of the law. In fact, my father at one point, when he and I had an argument later on in life, I was very upset about the fact that he was very harsh with the grandchildren and people and judgments and very judgmental. And he said, Kelly, he goes, I have the doctrine. I know the doctrine. Mom has the charity. That's all we need. And my response back was, well, I'd rather be like Mom. I would rather have the charity. And what does the Book of Mormon say about charity?
Never faileth. What?
Never faileth.
Yeah.
Charity never faileth. And in fact, if you're going to have one thing or another, the doctrine's not going to save you. It's the charity.
Yeah.
And that's, there's a lot of beautiful teachings in the Book of Mormon, though I do not believe that book anymore.
But it's almost like, it sounds like in your family, it was kind of a good cop, bad cop culture where your mom was the good cop, your dad played the bad cop. And it might even be that the church might have even supported that type of polarity where there needs to be the Book of Mormon talks about this. There needs to be mercy and there needs to be justice.
Yes.
And so it sounds like maybe your dad played the role of the Boyd K. Packer, Bruce R. McConkie, justice. Your mom played the role of mercy. And then you guys were kind of caught in the middle. I'm not trying to project that.
No, that's very, very accurate, except for the fact that my mom she struggled a lot with depression growing up. I mean, as she raised us.
Yeah.
8 kids. Dang, I don't know who.
And a patriarchy and a,
Right.
strictness and.
She had hormonal issues and stuff
did.
going on, and just
She had
different
some-
things. Yeah.
She had some
Poor-
severe
poor lady.
hormonal issues. In fact, I remember people would always say, because you go to church and you put on the good face at church. We get to church and people say, oh, your mom is Joanne Laing. Oh, she's the kindest, sweetest, most wonderful woman in the world. And I would look and go, my mom? Because at home she was also very strict.
Okay.
But also her emotions would cycle all the time based on her emotions. Sometimes she'd be very loving and sometimes she'd be very strict. And I don't want to say she was bipolar, but some of those tendencies were there.
It felt that way.
She did. And it wasn't until she had a hysterectomy when I was 16 that all of a sudden, that saint that everybody saw, she really became 24/7. In fact, it's hard for me not to get emotions about her. She passed away several years ago. But there is not another woman alive that I've known that it was as kind, as charitable, as serving, as giving, 100% from the time I was 16 on as my mom. In fact, 36 grandchildren, and all of us will vehemently agree. The sun rose and set in my mom's backyard. She became the quintessential grandma, the model of charity. She became the person that really the church wants you to become. And in fact, I would tell people all the time, look, I may not know Jesus Christ, but I know my mom. And if Christ is anything like my mom, then I know Jesus.
Wow.
That she was that in her funeral, the numbers that came out and the people and the stories that she served, it was amazing. But coming back, that very hard life growing up, it was very much guilt and shame ridden. I mean, my father it was all about the shame. In fact, if you say, hey, Dad, I feel like it would cut you off. You don't need to feel like that. You shouldn't feel like that. And feelings didn't matter. It was, what is the doctrine? What did I tell you? Nothing else mattered. Where my mom would listen. She'd bend the ear to you. And she had the charitable heart. So, I could write a doctorate.
And if someone were to ask kind of what are some of the touch points of doctrine, what are some of the pillars of doctrine as far as your dad and the Orthodox Mormon way kind of were?
The pillars of the doctrine definitely is Joseph Smith absolutely is the prophet. Absolutely, you do not question the brethren. He would tell all the B.H. Roberts church history stories as he wrote them. The Mormon doctrine, anything out of Mormon doctrine.
Bruce R. McConkie's Mormon doctrine.
Yeah, that's correct. Bruce R. McConkie's Mormon doctrine was, as important as the Book of Mormon, honestly. It was those pillars, Ezra Taft Benson, and teaching that the blacks in the priesthood, the ERA was a bad thing, the Equal Rights Amendment, very much against the things that were progressive and a very hard right conservative in everything he taught and did.
So tell me if I'm right, 6,000-year earth, no death before the flood, literal Adam and Eve as the first parents of the word, Cain was cursed with dark skin, like John Larson talked about, that blacks were less valiant in the pre-existence, and that's why they're black, that Lamanites were dark-skinned because their ancestors were evil, that women's role was to stay in the home and to be the nurturers of the children. It's the father's job to provide. Patriarchy ruled supreme. Masturbating was evil. It led to homosexuality.
Yes.
That it was a perversion in the sight of God, the whole miracle of forgiveness, Spencer W. Kimball sort of mentality, that sex was next to murder, that it'd be better to be brought home in a pine box than to come home from your mission without honor. Am I painting the type of Mormonism that you grew up in?
John, that was actually very light. If that was what I grew up with, that would have been a light side.
Really?
Really.
So I take it, what was the next level?
He believed all of that and more. I mean, we would be taught, the reason you were born into a Mormon home is because you were one of the chosen in the pre-existence. You have a great destiny and calling.
Responsibility.
Your responsibility is, fill in the blank. And, you are going to be the one that brings back Jesus Christ. And he goes, I don't know if I'm going to be alive, but I know that you guys will be alive.
The whole second coming.
The second coming, the apocalypse.
Is imminent.
Yes, everything.
Saturday's warrior, you're preserved in the last day to usher in Jesus's second coming.
Absolutely. The preaching of tithing and, home teaching is, you do not miss any home teaching at all. It's 100% at all times. If you do not go to church, you need to repent. You fasted every Sunday, and it was a mandatory fast. I mean, even to the point that I remember sneaking down to the cellar into the storage room and opening up cans of peaches. My brothers and I would be wolfing down bottles of peaches on fast Sundays. We would be sneaking stuff left and right.
Did you have to stay in your church clothes all Sunday?
Oh, geez. It depends. It depended on where he was sitting with his, I'm not doing good enough, or, is the family having issues? If they were having issues, then the rules got stricter.
So you'd have to stay in Sunday clothes all Sunday.
Exactly.
Even when you weren't at church.
Exactly.
Did you go out to eat on Sunday?
Never.
Did you watch TV on Sunday?
Lawrence Welk.
Osmonds.
Lawrence Welk, Osmonds. What was the Omaha, the nature show? Mutual of Omaha, Wild Kingdom.
Okay, so wholesome TV on Sunday.
Wholesome TV on Sunday.
Okay.
Right, but never anything that was.
What about rock music?
Oh.
Was of the devil.
In fact,
I remember you telling me that he thought it was of the devil.
In fact, I would never listen to the Beatles because the Beatles were satanic.
What?
Oh, did you not know every one of them?
I grew up on the Beatles. I know more 60s music than Kelly does, and he's a mute.
I'm an audiophile.
Yeah, so.
And so that was one of those things when I met Heather and found out her dad adores the Beatles. Knows
the evil
everything
music.
about the
You're
Beatles.
like, he's
And so-
sketchy. She comes from a sketchy family.
Exactly. So when I found that, I
So
was
you
like,
like me even more.
she must be bad, naughty. But yeah, so rock and roll, no. In fact, the number of times myself and my brothers had our tapes and CDs thrown out because we had rock music that
What
was
types of CDs and tapes?
Oh, you name it.
I care about music. So.
Oh, okay. So we had everything from Bon Jovi, starting off with Bon Jovi to Dokken to Van Halen, then get up to Iron Maiden, which is definitely harder. Metallica. Oh, Metallica was definitely satanic. Which makes
To
me
your dad, yeah.
which makes me laugh because years later I played the harmonic version with Metallica playing, and my dad said, "This is pretty dang good. Who is this?" And I said, "Metallica." Oh no, this is awful. This is horrible.
But they would throw out your tapes.
Oh,
or
they would.
CDs?
They would
Seriously,
yeah.
literally.
They would literally throw them out, burn them. My brother still is angry about that one. Very angry. They would anything that they would find that was not church approved, they would throw out. In fact, tank tops. Brothers would have tank tops. My mom would go and dad would take them. They'd throw them out. If there was anything that was not church approved in the home, on our rooms were searched regularly. They looked for porn. They looked for drugs. They looked for
Playboy magazines before the internet.
They looked for everything.
Victoria's Secrets magazines.
Oh yeah, and Sears catalogs they were gone quick. Because
There's lingerie.
There's some underwear in
there's
there.
underwear in the Sears catalogs.
That's awesome.
So all those
it's
things.
so Mormon.
Oh.
What about caffeine? What about Coke?
Oh, so
Caffeinated beverages.
there was a shift that took place
But early on,
and the reason is my dad would every once in a while have a Diet Coke because my aunt, she worked at the Maddox cafe up in Brigham
Maddox.
City. Oh yeah,
Brigham City.
in Brigham City. And so the brethren would come through in Brigham City.
The brethren.
The brother. Oh, you always referred to him as the brethren. It was always deep respect for the brethren.
Tom Perry and
Yes. Oh, and so when one of the prophets came through and had a dinner there one time and had a Diet Coke.
what?
And the story leaked up the chain from my aunt to my dad. Then all of a sudden, hey, if the prophets can do it, then it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then Diet Coke and Coke was okay.
Okay.
But definitely no coffee. I mean, nothing. It was uber super strict.
Okay.
Yeah. And as far as
Our movies?
oh no, never rated our movies. In fact, PG-13, we were not allowed most PG-13s. I wasn't allowed to watch most TV shows. Friends was an absolute no. Three's Company back in the day.
Yeah, I remember that.
Three's Company
Don
was-
Knotts, John Ritter.
Yeah.
Thumbs down.
We could
That's because the
watch
guy was living with
through
two
that.
girls.
Yeah. Dang.
Yeah.
Come and knock on our door.
Yeah. And now I'm going back and trying to catch up on some of those things. But it was through and through as orthodox. And, my father being a seminary teacher, it was, even after he finished being a seminary teacher, everything was about the church service. You were in the choir. You had to have a calling. You were, and your value and worth was based on what calling you had.
Just last night, we were talking to our Kelly's brother and sister-in-law, and his brother had said, "No, your sister-in-law." She was saying how whenever they come, Kelly's parents would come over or talk to Joe, Kelly's brother. He would always question, "Well, what calling do you have? What
First question.
What are you doing? How are you serving the church?" And Joe would say maybe nursery or something, and he's disapproval, like you,
Because-
a calling, a higher calling, in
Like?
air quotes, like bishopric or elders quorum president or something like that. That was seen as more of a status, like you were more righteous, you were doing what you're supposed to if you had a higher calling such as that in your thing. And so he was very judgmental of
right.
callings.
And as we moved around, he always had, every word we moved into, first and foremost was put in as gospel doctrine teacher. Oh, and he loved that calling because
Your dad? He could pontificate.
look what I know.
Sorry.
please,
So
go for it.
we actually were in the same ward for quite a few years, and that's where we met.
So you knew
Kelly and
these parents,
yeah. So I knew his family and his mom and dad, and my parents have commented later on, I think in the years, how just in Sunday school, how much they sit there and they're like, oh, because if they were in a Sunday school class with him, or we later in our married years, if we went to Sunday school with them, we always knew that, heaven help that Sunday school teacher, because we knew like his hand was just waiting
To correct every little
exactly
mistake and-
to correct
Or
all that was going on.
Or add the additional
Oh,
information.
absolutely. And you're like,
Insufferable.
"Ugh." Yes, that's a great word.
He always had to be the one that had the greater light and knowledge.
Absolutely.
And well, the brethren said, or in this doctrine, or in this book, and he would always. It was so uncomfortable. And in the military, he was moved around, and the few times that he would come and visit, it was always.
Oh yeah, it's a great time. I had to go to the bathroom a
Oh,
lot.
and if it was a woman that was the gospel doctrine teacher, God help her.
Oh, wow.
It was bad.
All right.
And so having that mentality, when we did have family hill meetings, and we were off and on, despite the orthodoxy, the family hill meetings, it was always just strict doctrine. It was very little fun. Everything was just about the church.
Very different than Heather's upbringing.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's kind of the worst of more. I don't want to say I don't want to paint are your parents alive?
My dad, my father is, yes.
Okay,
we
we're kind
do
of being
not-
hard on him and he's still alive.
Oh,
right?
and I'm fine with that. We've really had it out, and we do not speak to this day.
Oh, no.
And that will be part of the story later on. And I would love to have a relationship with my father. So, Rick, and that's you. Everybody knows his name. If you want to have a relationship with me at some point in life, I would love to. But you need to have an open, honest conversation with me about all of it.
I mean, just to be clear, the purpose isn't to back on your dad.
No.
But this is a Mormon story.
is.
And this is the Mormonism I was raised in, not by my family, but by all my church leaders, many of my church leaders. So I inherited this type of Mormonism because it's those are my church leaders. And so it's important to be able to tell your story. So it's not to trash on your dad.
No.
It's just to paint a picture for what many of our Mormon experiences were like. And you deserve to be able to tell that story, and you can still love your dad or want the best for him.
And to my father's credit, I will tell you, he worked hard raising 8 kids, providing for 8 kids, and what he did, hats off to him. It always will be.
Yeah.
And I'll be grateful for
And
that.
he was doing his best. And like we like to say, it's systems, not people, right?
Bingo.
So he was
Absolutely.
part of a system and doing the best that he could within the system.
And I don't know if I would have done as good as he did if I was in his shoes.
Right, right.
Yeah,
But when we know better,
We do better, hopefully.
yes.
that's right.
And then how was masturbation handled?
What's that? Just kidding. No, so it's interesting because
Especially with 7 young boys?
you're right. Sex was not talked about in our home.
Okay.
We were not taught about the birds and the bees. It was just one of these things you're supposed to know. And so growing up, I joke with Heather because when I went through the line in heaven, I went through the libido line 3 or 4 times. And so my sons are over there laughing. And we've had believe me, now we talk about everything like you would not believe. But it was interesting because the first time I actually saw a Playboy, in kindergarten, there was a kid that flashed something up, but it was very quick. But I was 12 years old, and we were out riding dirt bikes up in the hills, and there was this old rundown shack, and we found inside the shack this box of old Playboys. And I remember I was with a couple guys, and we opened those up and looked at that, and I thought, I had never seen anything in my life so beautiful. I'm like, oh my goodness! Like I don't want these feelings inside, and it was a different experience. And I could not believe how beautiful the female form was. But at the same time, I know how much the modesty and everything that they talked about, despite the fact they didn't talk about birds and bees, like I knew that this was something my parents would not approve of. And so we left the box, but then we'd come back time to time. And then we found 1 or 2 slipping back in the home. But masturbation never started for a couple years, actually. And truthfully, because I didn't figure it out. Nobody talked about it. But I did figure it out, like most people do, when you just don't talk about things. But a lot of time after that, we had moved and there were no Playboys. It just was there. But then when I remember in one deacon's quorum that I was in just towards the end, one of the teachers started to talk about masturbation, how bad it was. And the bishops would always ask us in our interviews, do you masturbate? And I had no freaking clue what it was. I'm like, no idea. Not knowing what it meant. And then when one leader kind of explained it, I thought, and then when he explained it was, sexual sin was next to murder and that we're literally killing Jesus every time we do this, I was just mortified inside. And I felt so horrible. And so I stopped. I stopped. And I would stop for 5-6 months at a time, and then I would slip. And then I would try, go through the process again and stop. But I never confessed to any leader until I was 15. I was 16. And I had heard, the first time in my life, I felt like I had heard a talk in church where I felt the Spirit. And when I felt that Spirit, I thought, I want to change. I want to be better. And I was very infrequent in doing it, but I was still doing it. And so I went and talked to the bishop, thinking I could keep it private. And when I talked to the bishop and got it all out, I thought, okay, confession, it's done. And then he said the words that'll haunt me forever. Now you need to go tell your parents. And I was mortified because I had to go face my parents. And you have to tell them tonight when you go home. And I did. I went home and I told them. And I will never forget approaching my mom and dad that night and said, hey, Mom, Dad, can I talk? And we sat down to talk, and it took me a little bit to spit it out. And I said, Mom, Dad, I just got back from the bishop. And I've had a little bit of a problem with masturbation. Looking for help. My mom just shook her head, said nothing. My dad said to me a phrase that I heard from him twice in my life. He looked at me and said, you Judas. You fucking Judas. I taught you better than that.
He said the F word?
Mm-hmm. I've heard him say the F word twice in my life. That was one of them. And he guilted and shamed me and said, you're going to fix this. If you're going to serve a mission and become a righteous father and priesthood holder, you need to fix this.
Holy moly.
And so we talked about how they were going to get me pajamas that tied up tight, to make sure at night that they were going to talk to me often about it. They'll ask me every day.
Tight pajamas, why?
Oh, so you didn't touch yourself. And so it was less of a temptation. Making sure that there was no magazines or anything that was titillating in the house that we were very careful about. I mean, when commercials came on that had anything that would have any sort of female form, my mom and dad would always change it immediately. And that hyper focus on pushing away anything sexual out of the home did just the opposite for those boys.
And you.
Yes, and me. And I include myself as that. And so I went through the process of,
This is the Marky Peterson. By the way, there's a whole Marky Peterson memo on how to deal with masturbation that includes like tying your hands to the bedposts at night and sleeping with your hand, the whole tight fitting versus loose fitting, what you do in the bathroom and what you don't do in the bathroom. Like there's a whole memo. We should find it included in the show notes that Mark Peterson, the apostle, tried to create, which has wreaked a lot of havoc on a lot of Mormon boys.
Absolutely right. And I've read that since. And those same conversations took place where my father even said, hey, if we need to tie your hands to the bedpost, we will, if that will help you out. But keep your hands above the blankets. Don't put your hands below the blankets. All those types of things.
What does that do to a boy?
Well, the next natural thing is you have the nocturnal emissions, or AKA wet dreams, which no one ever talked to me about.
Yeah.
And so we go for a period of time, and I don't do it. But of course, what starts? The nocturnal emissions. So when that happens, and at first you're like confused and like, what's going on here? That was a great dream, man. I've never done that in real life. How did I dream that? But I remember, being ashamed and feeling ashamed that even happened. Do I need to confess this to the bishop? And so, but not having anybody to talk to, I just kept it quiet. But I remember one night it was really bad. And I woke up and, you got semen all over you. And so I grabbed a shirt, I wiped myself off and cleaned myself off, and I wadded it up. And I was in the basement. I stuck it up in the corner of the closet. And thinking, okay, I'll just take care of it later. Well, I'm 16 years old. Of course, I'm not going to remember that. So I come home one day, and it's a Saturday, and I'm up in the living room, and all of a sudden I hear, Kelly! My father screaming my name from the basement. I'm like, oh no. And I go running downstairs, and my father's standing there in my room with that shirt. What the hell is this? We talked about this. How could you? How could you? And just guilted the living shit out of me. So disappointed. You're going to go talk to the bishop.
And that was a wet dream.
It was. And I tried explaining to him, Dad, I didn't. But he wouldn't believe me. And so part of me said, you know what? If I'm going to get blamed for it, I might as well.
Yeah.
And so I went back and forth. And there were times, and I really was kind of this back and forth child of, do I or don't I? And I wouldn't call myself by any measure of imagination the all-in goody two-shoes teenager. Definitely not. I mean, I never drank, I never smoked, because in my mind, the way we're taught is, okay, on the order of sins, there's murder, there's drinking, there's smoking, drugs are up in there, and there's sexual sins right down below smoking and drinking. So in my mind, it was like, oh, well, as long as you don't smoke and drink, you can still make it in the celestial kingdom. And of course, not have sex, which gets to my patriarchal blessing in a second. And so I decided, I really try not to, and I really tried not to, and didn't for a long time. But every once in a while, I would drop in and out. But I'll never forget the feeling and that guilt and the shame of that. And I know that some of my brothers went through the same thing, and that same guilting, that same shaming. The emotional abuse with that guilting and shaming, which inadvertent as it was, I'm sure, because of his upbringing and how he was taught from the church, was very real, and it's very damaging. And I think that has shaped a lot of my personality as I went into adulthood.
Mm-hmm. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I will tell you, I think it's part of my pieces, as far as the other sexual pieces, and I'm very open about this, and I've talked to my boys all about this. When I got married to Heather, I was a virgin. But I sure did have some other sexual experiences with girls where, petting along the way. But the reason I never had sex, even though I wanted to along the ways at times, before I met Heather, was because I truly believed that patriarchal blessing that I got. And I was 12 years old. And it was kind of these things where all three of the boys got their patriarchal blessings all at the same time. I was 12, Joe was 14, Dan was 16. And we went in and we sat down, and the patriarch interviews you, and, what's your hopes, dreams, desires? And he takes notes and everything. And I remember, I at the time wanted to be in the military and a jet pilot or a nuclear engineer. And I talked about all my hopes and wanting to be married and mission. And then we had our patriarchal blessing. And magically, my patriarchal blessing matches almost everything I said. Weird.
Everything you had told the patriarch beforehand?
Right. But the line, there's one of the lines in there that is very key is it said that you will marry a wise young virgin. That part always stuck out to me. And that line prevented me from ever having sex because that middle child, that lost child syndrome came into factor because I remember telling a couple of people at 16, and Heather remembers this too, there's nothing I wanted more in life as a teenager than to find somebody later on that would love me as much as I love them. That was a very huge part of my drive in life. Not just the physical side, but the true emotional, mental, physical, complete immersion in somebody that would want me, love me, care for me as much as I cared and loved them. And I knew that if I found somebody like that, if I had sex with them, my patriarchal blessing said I wouldn't marry him. And so I wouldn't have sex.
Mm.
So yeah, we didn't.
We didn't.
And Heather, you fulfilled the prophecy.
I sure did.
She did.
I don't know how wise I was, but I was a virgin.
Yeah. And, I think about this a lot. Sometimes I have like Christian or even believing Jewish listeners that are like, John, you really harp on this masturbation, sexuality thing. Sex is harmful to many teens and young adults. It's good that the church is strict about these things. Even if there's a lot of guilt and shame, there's a lot of bad about STIs and unwanted pregnancies and that sexual behavior before adulthood can be problematic. And so, I guess we could have this whole conversation about whether it's truly harmful or not that the church is serious about these things because is it terrible that you guys were married as virgins or is there good things about it? And we don't need to get into that now, but
I would just like to mention one thing, like along those lines. I I've definitely thought about this a lot lately, and I think yes, there are those safety concerns, and so if you want to look at it from that view, the principle is just like, wait, don't do all this, don't, and for later. But I feel that it can be done a different way, because the shame behind the way that the Mormon Church teaches that, I think, is much more harmful than another way. I think you can teach safety, and you can teach the reality of
and
life,
health
consent, and all those good things that are very realistic and good, because people are going to make their choices no matter what. And you can teach those, but the way that it's taught, I feel, is very harmful, and because of the shame of it. And I do not. It hurts a psyche, and it hurts life later on. I feel like, for me, like, it didn't internalize it so much, but definitely the way I was taught, I was very good. It created, I think, after our marriage, it created definitely a barrier to intimate relations. Healthy sexual relations to just suddenly change and like, oh, this is great now and wonderful and stuff. So I don't think it's a good thing.
How about for you, Kelly? Was it harmful, do you think, overall?
I do. I think it's very harmful. And the reason is because even though when we got married, I was all about, oh, I could finally have sex and it was great, there was always that guilt piece that was in the back of my head, and especially
associated, right?
Associated.
All the negativity for the years of negative associations, right?
Yes.
With sexual.
And I was always questioning in my head, is this something that she truly wants? Which is not a bad question, because I want her to consent to a sexual relationship whenever we have it, because that's part of our relationship, and it should never be one way or the other. But at the same time, we have known so many members of the church, and as I've served in callings throughout the years, the number of marriages that we've dealt with, where the stigma of sex is bad, and then all of a sudden you get married and it's good, that transitions over into the marriage with so many LDS couples, and the sexual relationship they have is horrible. And there's a saying that I heard several years ago that, ironic enough, my mom told me. She said, 5% of a good marriage. So let me back up. 95% of a bad marriage is a bad sex life. 5% of a good marriage is a good sex life. Meaning, if the sex life is good between you, it becomes almost a non-issue. There's so much else part of the marriage. And marriage isn't about sex. It's just one wonderful aspect of it.
But if it's bad.
And we've seen so many marriages ripped apart over that bad relationship.
To ruin the whole thing.
And right.
And we've talked a lot about LGBT youth suicide, and that's a real thing. There is a whole nother, I'll say, epidemic of Mormon youth that are either depressed or super anxious and or even suicidal. And I believe that there have been actual completed successful suicides from hyper-conscientious Mormon youth that just have not been able to stop masturbating, and then just all the guilt and compounded family shame and church shame, and do you get sent home from your mission early or not, or do you get to go on a mission or not, do you get kicked out of BYU or not, all that stuff can wreak havoc even on heterosexual Mormon youth lives, let alone gay and LGBTQ youth as well. So it's a serious thing. That's why we talk about it, not because we're sex obsessed, but because it's a real epidemic of anxiety and depression and sometimes suicidality. And that's why we always talk about it. And also just because I believe that the Mormon church business model is tied to shame. Because if you don't feel shame, why do you need Jesus and the atonement and your bishop and the church? And so the church has to instill shame to be able to bind people with their guilt and shame to a pattern, a relationship of dependency with priesthood, with leaders, and with the church overall.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And when you look at the statistics of it too, where depending on which survey you're looking at, 96, 98% of young men do. Yeah. And there's upwards of 2/3 to 3/4 of the females at some point in their teenage years will in the church. Yeah. So all these young men that are passing the sacrament either are or have been, but yet the stigma.
Yep. All right. So we covered that.
So growing up, it was very different dichotomies. And so my family moved all over. My dad finally left teaching seminary, couldn't support 8 kids on the seminary teacher's salary. And so we ended up getting a job with the different technological companies and then ended up working for the government for Idaho National Laboratories in Idaho Falls. and where he could provide for the family. But even still, with 8 kids, 8 mouths to feed, we did not have a lot. In fact, I would still say we were dirt poor in comparison to a lot of the people that lived around us that we went to high school with. And that definitely had a weigh down on me. But I remember moving in to the 11th ward. We moved on to 12th Street, and Heather lived on 11th Street. Oh, no, just the opposite. Sorry. Third ward. I missed my numbers.
In Idaho Falls.
In Idaho Falls. And her parents lived on 12th Street. I lived on 11th Street. And I remember going there the first time. I was 16 years old. We always got to church early because that's what you got to do. You can't be late for church. And we were sitting there in the pew, and I looked over. Church had already started. And what I found out later was the pattern. The Perks came strolling in.
We definitely weren't early.
That's your maiden name?
But yes.
Perks?
Okay.
Perks.
So the Perks came strolling in, and I remember seeing Gloria, her mom, come in, and then Heather was right in behind a toe, and she was angry. She had that just mad teenage face, but she had this long, gorgeous hair, red dress, just absolutely beautiful, beautiful girl. And I was immediately smitten. And I thought, dang, we moved into the right ward. My father was definitely inspired. And but come to find out, she was a little angry that day because her mom had a little bit of a fight before church.
Yeah, mornings before church were never happy. Getting everybody ready for church.
But so that's where our introduction came, because we went after sacrament meeting, went into Sunday school, her mom was our Sunday school teacher. And that's where I got to meet Heather for the first time, the shy girl with long hair.
Yeah, I don't know. Did I even talk?
Well, I tried to talk with you.
I know, you probably did.
Yeah. And that became a pattern. I would flirt with her, and she was shy. And so I would think that she didn't really like me or give me any cues back. But we became friends. And her mom was our Sunday school teacher.
Kelly's very persistent. It's a good thing, especially with me.
And her mom was the best Sunday school teacher I ever had. Not only because she'd always bring treats and cookies, Rice Krispie treats, things like that, but she really loved us. She loved every one of those kids, and they all loved her. And she was not a scriptorian.
No.
But what she brought was love and kindness. And I always felt comfortable in there, and I loved it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I remember meeting you. You were new. We didn't get many. We grew up in a very old ward, and so I was probably the only girl my age for years and years and years. There's some older, some younger, but so there weren't that many youth, and so to have a family move in with youth, especially like boys, is wonderful. So you're very novel. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. And so that's where we started meeting, but not getting any signs back. And Heather knows I always would ask girls on dates, and she wasn't actually 15 when I moved in, so she wasn't of dating age yet, so I couldn't ask her out on dates. And so I ended up dating different girls at the school and getting a girlfriend. And that girl will end up watching this Mormon Story. We still have contact with her, and she's still a very lovely person, very much a TBM. We even had a conversation lately about this, knowing the fact that I left the church. We got to be very close with this girl, and she was somebody that I would still say to this day, if people are going to ask, how many people have you loved in your life, girls? I'd say there's 2. And that was probably one of only 2 that I truly, truly loved. Not anything in comparison to Heather.
Of course.
Well, thank you for that disclaimer.
Yeah, well, but I also, there was also, and I don't want to disclose her story name, I will not say her name, there was some physical relationship there. And when I started to really find my testimony, and there was that physical relationship going, and I couldn't break free from that, and she couldn't break free from that.
Couldn't keep your hands off each other.
That's right. I remember going to a youth conference, and I went to this youth conference, and it was where I was just started reading the Book of Mormon. And I said, I need to really understand this book. And I had gotten into Jacob chapter 5. And Jacob chapter 5, the allegory of the olive tree, weird enough, was where I got my testimony of the Book of Mormon. And because I felt like I need to go on a mission. And I went to this youth conference, and this youth conference, I was made one of the youth leaders, ironic enough, with Heather. So we were kind of the ma and pa. It wasn't a trek, but it was kind of this old Rick's College youth camp. Badger Creek. And we had a blast there that week. And we laughed and we played and pushed you out of the canoe. And
Wasn't happy about that.
no, don't get Heather wet. And
I still liked you.
we had a blast, but I remember we were at this climbing wall and just laughing. It was towards the end of the week. And it was right at the end of everybody else had went up the climbing wall. Looked over and the eyes kind of caught. And I realized, dang, I like you more than just a friend. And I knew. It was just, it was an intense feeling. Like if I was going to say I was going to feel the Spirit at some point in my life, that was I felt it that day. And that changed me that night. And we went to a fireside that night, and I gave her my jacket, and we sat and we held hands.
It was, I did not know how to act with boys. I was so shy. I know I keep saying that, but Kelly is very good at conversations, and he's very good at just making you feel comfortable and loved, and like you're worthy, you're worth something, you're cool and stuff. And so it was like my first conversations I really had with a boy, a guy, and it was awesome. I was on cloud nine.
And I was too. And I remember going back and immediately breaking up with that girl because I realized, one, because I felt the Spirit there at that camp, and I also decided I want to go on a mission. I can't keep doing this. And I knew that I needed to break free. And so I really jumped into my TBM days at that point. And Heather and I started dating, and we started dating very frequently.
Yeah.
And I would pick her up for school in the mornings. We were always together. Everybody knew it was Heather and Kelly. And you did not see us apart very often.
No. Your whole senior year, we were together.
Yeah. And I will say I was very scared of her dad. Her dad's quiet like she was.
He is very quiet. He's a man of little words.
Yeah. But he's not a mean man, just the opposite.
No, he's just...
But I also went off the judgment. So my father was very judgmental of her dad because he wasn't always coming to church, didn't make a lot of money. He was a meat cutter, didn't have a degree, didn't serve in the callings. And so I always heard comments about her dad, and it was hurtful. And I remember the day that I broke up with that one girl, and I started going out with Heather. Now, let me remind you, I was absolutely just 100% just head over heels for Heather. My father found out, and he goes, "Why did you break up?" And he said her name, "With so-and-so, to go out with Heather. The other girl is so much prettier."
Your dad said that?
Yes. And it
Kelly
broke my
didn't
heart.
tell me this until not very long ago.
Yeah. I was always angry inside that my father would say that. Because that also taught me that he saw the superficial, not what was in here. And I've realized that over the years is to him, everything was about appearances. Things had to look good. And it was a perfectionism that he passed on to me. And my boys will be able to talk about that in their interview. That perfectionism ran rampant throughout my entire life. And one of the best things about leaving the church is being able to leave that perfectionism. He didn't see the perfection that I had just gotten into my life with Heather. He saw a superficial perfectionism and out of looks at somebody that he thought was more attractive. Regardless.
I don't think he's so hot either.
What was that, Heather?
I said, I don't think he's so hot either.
She's got a fire in her for sure. But we dated and we were inseparable. I mean, we had some of those magical first, second, third, and fourth.
Kelly's very creative and fun, and he has a lot of energy, and so we had a good time. He is a great romantic, and we had a lot of very romantic dates. I will say, we dated that entire time, and I went in. I tried to kiss her. I remember in the fall of my senior year. Oh boy!
Oh, it's just coming out. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Fall of our senior year, I remember dropping her off at the house, and I walked her to her door, and I went in, and it was cold, and I went in for a kiss. And I remember she's looked up at me, and as I went in for the kiss, it was, head went to the side.
She dodged.
Oh, she totally dodged me. And so I'm going to respect your boundaries. And I waited maybe 6 weeks. I tried again. And again, it was a dodge. Oh, I remember. And I'm an idiot. And I tried again probably a couple months later and got another dodge. And so, but at that point, I said, oh, you know what? She's not comfortable with that. We held hands. We'd snuggle. She wasn't comfortable with that. So I'm going to respect that. And it wasn't until May, just before I graduated and went to college, she's a year younger than me, that we went on a date. She drove, she planned the date, and we went and we sat in front of the temple.
Oh.
Idaho Falls Temple.
So romantic.
It was her dad's truck. So, Carol, if you're listening to this, yes, the first kiss was in your truck.
He'd respect that.
He would. And we were sitting there talking and laughing, and it was kind of this little silence too. And I was holding her in my arms, and she was leaning back against me, and she looked back and put her head up and her face up, and it would just kind of happen. And she kissed me, and I thought, whoa, the world has just changed. And, the kissing began. We would make out. When I say make out, it would just be kissing. French kissing came later on, but there was nothing, no petting, no anything, even though I probably would have if there were boundaries that were dropped. But thank goodness she was the one that helped me fulfill that patriarchal blessing.
And that's a Mormon girl's role.
Yeah, and you know what? I look back at it, and honestly,
It is.
what I just didn't know how. I'm the oldest of the kids, and I didn't really. Nobody had ever talked to me. My friends didn't really, they weren't making out with their boyfriends or kissing, and my mom never. So I'm like, I don't even know what to do. I don't even I guess it's supposed to come naturally. I didn't feel like it did to me, but I think I wanted to. I just didn't know how to go about it, and so.
But I will tell you,
I figured it out.
that was probably one of those things that endeared me to her.
Oh boy.
But Heather
She
knew
helped keep you clean.
She did, but she knew
Inadvertently.
she fulfilled that dream that I had, somebody that would love me as much as I love them. And dang, I felt loved by Heather Perks. And I held on. And so I went to college for a year.
Where?
So my first year of college, I went, you're going to laugh at this. My patriarchal blessing said that I needed to go, that I needed to serve in the military. And so I did everything to get...
Because you told him you wanted to serve in the military.
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
But I followed that. I've got to serve. And, my father said, oh, you do not want to be enlisted. Heather's dad was enlisted. And so another reason why my father looked down on him. You need to be an officer. Well, okay, so I need to be an officer. So I worked my butt off to get good grades all through my school to get into the academy. So
Which one?
I applied to all of them. And I put
Air Force,
Army, Navy, and Merchant Marine Academy.
Okay.
And I wanted to be a pilot, but I also my goal was to be a pilot. And I said, I'm going to go to the Naval Academy. I applied, to
be a Navy pilot.
Right. But you apply
Like John McCain.
Right. Exactly.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
But if you, that's interesting because I was at his funeral.
Oh.
That's completely sidebar.
Oh, wow.
One of the best funerals I've been at. I wanted to serve, but I wanted to fly. Because I always said, I want to be a pilot or I want to be a nuclear engineer. But I really wanted to serve. So I went and applied to all the academies. And I remember praying and fighting, with God, is this what I'm supposed to do? And getting that confirmation, yes, you will go to the academy. What I realize now is confirmation bias, but that's a different topic. But in pushing for all of that, I went and I got appointments from senators and congressmen. But I got appointments not to the Naval Academy. I got appointments to West Point and to Kings Point, Army, and the Merchant Marine Academy. Those were what I got.
Who are the senators?
The senators. One was Senator Larry Craig.
Idaho, yeah.
Idaho.
Yeah.
And
Doesn't matter.
yeah. And so I got the nominations. You get nominations first, and then you apply to the academy for appointments. And it's very, very competitive. In fact, the Naval Academy, 1 out of every 18 that actually gets a nomination will actually get an
Oh,
appointment.
wow.
Yeah, and so just to get a nomination is extremely competitive. And so these academies are hyper competitive. And they don't just look at grades, they look at the entire person, which is right. And having worked at the academy, and I'll get to that later on, is very critical that you do. So I ended up getting appointments to both West Point and Kings Point. I didn't want to go Army. So I said, I'll go Kings Point, Merchant Marine Academy, because I prayed about it, and that's the answer I got. So I went to the Kings Point Merchant Marine Academy for a year.
Which is where?
In Long Island, New York.
Okay.
Phenomenal.
Oh.
In fact, a friend of mine just got an appointment there that's in our home, was in our old warrant in Washington.
I don't hear about it as much as Annapolis or West Point or the Air Force Academy.
No, you don't. It takes the same requirements to get in. It used to fall under the Department of Transportation. It's now falls under the DOD, Department of Defense, because after 9/11, they brought all of those entities together. And I could get in all the Title 10, Title 50, Title 16, and Doctrine. I know. But there's reasons why they brought that in.
Yeah.
And so it actually helps protect that too. The Merchant Marine is very critical to our nation. But out of the Merchant Marine Academy, you can commission Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, or the best deal, you go into the Merchant Marine Service, which is you serve in U.S. flag merchant ships or the maritime industry for a period of 5 years. And
is Coast Guard a part of this at all? Or?
No, there's Coast Guard Academy. They have their own academy. Yeah. But the pay coming out of the Merchant Marine Academy is phenomenal.
Huh.
And so that's one of the reasons why I chose it too.
Okay.
So
he went to New York.
I did. I went to New York.
A year.
I had never been outside of Idaho, Utah, Wyoming. I never saw the ocean.
Never seen the ocean.
And so I go to the Merchant Marine Academy, and I remember the shock that night, staying in the hotel, just flying in New York, looking across the bay at New York City, thinking, "What did I just do?" And I was scared. And I showed up at that academy, and I held on to two things: my testimony and my Heather. That was my safety net.
My Heather, that's so sweet.
He is pretty sweet.
And she was an integral part of that academy experience. So I got there, and there's only about 4 other midshipmen there that were members of the church, and it was talk about a baptism by fire.
How big's the class about?
So the Merchant Marine Academy, there was only at the time I believe it was only about 1,800 students. Very small. Well, the Naval Academy is only 4,400, so about half the size. Okay. And so as I get there and I'm getting indoctrinated and going through some very tough experiences, and I could talk for hours about all that.
Do they beat you down?
Oh, they do. The plebe summer,
and yell at you, and
shave your head, run you around in the middle of Long Island summer. You just get
Long Island. New York's hot in the summer.
It is very hot.
Humid.
Yeah. But it was magical. I had never experienced the East Coast. Seeing the Long Island Sound, the sailboats going by, the military culture, I was enthralled, and I had found my spot.
You loved it?
I loved it. Oh, I ate it up.
He thrives.
It was difficult to go through.
Were you athletic in high school?
I loved to ski, ride motorcycles.
But you weren't like football, basketball?
I played football younger on. I wrestled with my brother. I didn't want to be like my brothers because I didn't want to live after they were the absolute jocks in high school and everybody worshipped them.
You didn't want to follow in their footsteps.
So I wanted to set my own name.
Okay.
I was tired.
You were athletic enough to where you could handle boot camp, basically.
Yes, I was very athletic. Hike, bike, I would.
Okay.
Yeah. And I grew up working on farms, moving pipe, hauling hay, shearing sheep, castrating cattle. You name the dirty job.
Castrating cattle?
Sheep. Oh, Mason doesn't want me to tell the castrating cattle stories. I often joke with my sailors. I said, look, micro, dirty jobs, he's got nothing on me. No, it's because I did some dirty, nasty, hardworking jobs growing up because we didn't have money. And my dad said, if you want a car, clothes, education, anything, you need to earn it yourself. So I grew up working on a lot of manual labor. So the academy was intense, but at the same time, well, after I got there was a Catholic father that showed the student body a movie that all of a sudden I had people coming left and right to me, just questioning me about, what is this? You believe this? Do you believe that? The movie was The Godmakers.
Yeah.
And I had never heard
Around
of the
what
show.
year is this?
This was in 1992, right when I showed up to the academy. And so
A Catholic
father showed the student
Godmakers
body.
to your peers. Mm-hmm. That sucks.
Oh, he hated Mormons. This Catholic father really hated Mormons. And so I was shocked. And so they were asking me about the temple, and I'd never been through the temple. They're asking me about all these weird polygamy, not polyandry yet. They were asking me about these just things in the church and Joseph Smith being a gold digger. I'm like, no, he had gold plates. And why do you call him a gold digger just because he had gold plates? And they were given to him by an angel. And I was testifying. And I called my father. I said, Dad, what is going on? These people are, they showed the student body this movie called The Godmakers. And they're asking me all these questions. can you help me? He's like, Kelly, I got you. I'm sending you a book. You need to read it cover for cover and you become a defender of the faith. This is part of your calling in life. He sent me
The Truth About the Godmakers?
Mormon Doctrine.
Oh, okay.
Mormon Doctrine. And so I devoured Mormon Doctrine and I started, preaching and teaching the gospel. In fact, we would have these discussions late night in our dorms and people would come in and they were asking all kinds of questions about the church. And I became an expert in my mind.
We called it a scriptorian.
Oh, I became a scriptorian because I was reading the Book of Mormon. I was getting through the third time in my life, and I was new to Mormon doctrine. Then I was reading Jesus the Christ, and I was getting through the work and the glory, and I could explain it all. And I was becoming the apologist for the church.
Yeah.
And I was helping others. One midshipman that I helped that came out to me that he was Mormon, but he'd left the faith, converts back and leaves the academy to go on a mission. And I felt so good about myself because I was doing everything that was right. And I could always spin those stories as faith-promoting stories, and I did for years and years. But the academy was pinnacle for me to cement my testimony because once you have to defend something, it's that reverse effect. You start believing more.
Converts you.
And I did through and through. And it became a very, very challenging time. And I worked through and I became kind of this leader amongst the LDS midshipmen to where I organized temple trips and, vans to get to sacrament meeting because there was no meetings on the academy grounds. We had to go out in town. And then we met a bunch of nannies that were in the ward and I would get dates and I would date other people still because that was what you did. You still date if you can't be together, even though we called every weekend and spend 2 rolls of quarters on calls every weekend.
So we had
To our Gen Zers, you used to have to put a quarter in a payphone.
crazy.
There were no cell phones. And payphones is the way you had to physically pay for a call, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
we're so old-fashioned.
And so I get out to the academy and then we start to get liberty and I'm starting to go out on town in New York City and go to, and you're wearing uniform. When I'm wearing uniform out in New York City, there's a lot of great patriots out there. They'd pay for your dinners and buy you this or that. You go to the USO and they had free tickets to Broadway shows. And my mind was getting just open to educational and cultural experiences that I'd never had. And it was phenomenal. I keep calling Heather and telling her about this. I said, you have got to come out here. And so
Yeah.
I invited her out.
My senior year was in May of my senior year. My parents came with me and we flew to New York and he hosted us for, we were there for 5 days, weren't we? And we went to New York City and it was amazing. It was the first time I had ever flown. And then just to go to New York City, it was eye-opening and amazing.
And then on top of that, her little rebellious streak, her mom and dad weren't quite sure if she was going to let her go. And she just flat out told them, if you don't go with me, I'm going by myself. So she put her foot down.
And that was big for me because that was scary. But
and at the same time, I had just put my papers in for a mission call. And I had just told the academy I'm going to leave the academy after the first year because I'm going to go serve a mission. And I was in it to win it. I was 100% following my father's footsteps.
Except he didn't go on a mission.
Exactly.
well, you're following what your father wanted you to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And all the expectations of what he considered failings in life, of things that he didn't do, his regrets. And so I ended up leaving the academy, and that was very difficult. Full ride scholarship, meals, tuition, board, everything, an engineering degree, to leave the academy after a year to go on a mission. You have to, at that point, I had to turn down everything and then have to reapply to come back. And I get my mission call and I go to Brazil. I go to Brazil on a mission and Heather goes to Rick's.
Yep.
You want to tell your part before I tell my mission?
It was pretty basic. I went to Rick's. I studied social work because of my patriarchal blessing. It said in there that I would help people to feel good about themselves. And so that kind of translated. I'm like, okay, I guess that's what it is.
It didn't say you'd be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company?
No,
What?
darn. But just that I was going to be very helpful, make people feel good. And so I went to Rick's College and I had a great time. I had great roommates. They were super fun. And I didn't party in like the sense of people would say party, but I just had fun and just soaked it up and stuff. And I wouldn't say I put my heart into the studying part of it. And so I made good friends. And after that year, though, I looked at where I was at and how my heart wasn't into the studying part of it. And so I decided not to go back because I figured I shouldn't pay that much money just to go have fun. And so I got a job I lived at home, and I got a job that second year that Kelly was on his mission, and worked from home. And I'm a homebody too, so it wasn't a bad year for me. I enjoyed being at home. I enjoyed working. I just was it was good. I'm pretty good about I'm chill about things. So that was that. Basically, there was nothing really exciting in that 2 years besides having fun at Rick's College first year and just working and enjoying being at home the second year.
Kissing another boy.
I did. I kissed. I had a friend from high school. We got. Oh, I went to one young single adult dance, and all I can remember mostly was that there were a lot of really old men there. 30-year-olds. Really old. And I was 18. And so I'm like, this is weird. But he was there, and we got reconnected, and then we dated a little bit. He rock climbed. I went rock climbing with him and stuff. And then we went on a date, and we kissed for a while. and all I could think was like, definitely does not kiss like Kelly. It's kind of like, ew. And then I kind of felt guilty. I'm like, I don't really like him like that. I like Kelly. I like being with Kelly. And so we stayed friends. I told him, like, I don't really want to kiss anymore. And he's like, okay. And so we stayed friends and stuff, but my heart was definitely more into Kelly. So, and that was it.
You broke her, Kelly.
I did.
He did break me.
You ruined her.
There wasn't anybody else for me.
And likewise. We so I'll pick off then. We're going on the mission.
Okay.
I knew I was to go serve, and I was prepared. And I had read the Book of Mormon several times at this point, Doctrine and Covenants, New Testament, Pearl of Great Price, all of those many times. I hadn't read the Old Testament yet, but I felt like, as you mentioned, I was a scriptorian. I get to the MTC, and the MTC was just an eye-opening experience. I mean, the first time I get to a place where the ice cream bars, you could go and get as many as you wanted.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
BYU food, basically.
That's right,
yeah.
BYU food.
Pies and...
And as I saw so many other new missionaries struggling with the MTC, it was not a struggle for me because I just got finished with the academy experience, and I thought, this is a walk in the park. And so I was just soaking this all up, and had a lot of really neat experiences going through there, and made some great friends. And I will just put this caveat out there. There's a lot of great experiences I've had inside of the Mormon Church. There's a lot of great things I've learned and who I became because of the teachings, experiences, the service. And so I don't want people to think that the church is bad because we've left. It is not right for us, and the foundations for us are not true. So I just want to be very clear about that. But while I'm in the MTC, I remember Richard G. Scott came and spoke to us.
Yeah, your boy.
Oh, my word. Richard G. Scott, who worked for Admiral Rickover. Right. I'm not a Navy nuclear submariner yet.
Yeah.
But Richard G. Scott, who worked for Admiral Rickover. And
Who was?
Admiral Rickover is the father of the nuclear Navy.
Yeah.
The hardest probably admiral that's ever existed in the Navy. He's the
hardest?
Hardest.
What does that mean?
He was notorious for just being cutthroat and ruthless. In fact, President Reagan had to fire him. He was the longest serving admiral in the United States Navy.
Wow.
He would not retire. He developed the Navy nuclear reactors, implemented that, came up with the design for the Nautilus submarine, all of that. And Richard G. Scott worked under him.
Yeah.
And Richard G. Scott is, a nuclear engineer.
Was an apostle.
An apostle of the Lord.
Yeah.
And Richard G. Scott left naval reactors to go serve a mission. And in fact, when Richard G. Scott told Admiral Rickover that he was leaving naval reactors to go serve a mission, Richard G. Scott Admiral Rickover lost his mind. And it, very true to form, just chewed him out and said, I won't, he goes, you're a traitor to the country. I will guarantee you'll never work in the nuclear industry again, and just threatened him left and right. And Richard G. Scott still left. And that story is in an ensign you can look up if anybody wants to know. And it's a cool story. But Richard G. Scott went and served a mission, then gets called as, later on as apostle. And so I had this deep respect for Richard G. Scott. He was very soft-spoken and very spiritual, and I really respected him. And I remember they told us he was coming.
He also spoke Spanish and did a lot of work in Latin America.
He did. He
as
did.
An apostle. Yeah.
When we found out he was coming, we skipped the meal to go sit in the very front row to make sure I was right there at the foot of the apostle when he spoke to us. I had notes, my companions, and for my district, we were there ready to learn from the Apostle Lord. And he came and delivered almost a 2-hour dissertation on the life of Jesus Christ. And I will tell you, that was the best talk I'd ever heard in my life up to that point.
Yeah.
I sat there in tears at so many points and wrote down, took so many notes. And as he testified about Jesus Christ, who he was, his life, his mannerisms, what he went through, it was eye-opening as I'm hearing this because, an apostle is also one that communicates with God in Christ. And then he gets to the end of his talk and he talks about this second anointing, a calling and an election made sure. And he talks about this calling and election made sure. And he said, he goes, the calling and election made sure. And I'd read this before in Mormon doctrine, so I knew what it was. And he's explaining it to the group, which in Mormon doctrine says, calling and election made sure is nothing more and nothing less than having Jesus Christ personally appear to you as a second witness. It is, the first one is the Holy Ghost. The second witness, hence the calling and election made sure, or second anointing, is when Jesus Christ comes and appears to you. And that's very clear in Mormon doctrine. And he was very clear about that in his talk. No more, no less than Christ coming to you. And he talks about the sacredness of it. And then he goes on and says, since Joseph Smith, there's been 186 men that have received the calling and election made sure. And he pauses. And he looks at the congregation, all these elders and sisters, and said, elders, sisters, I want you to know that I know that Christ lives, and not by my spiritual eyes. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. And walks off. And I was just tingling. And this man has seen Christ. This man has walked and talked with our Savior. And that, to me, was one of these testimony builders like none other.
And when we talk about influence or undue influence, what does that do to the mind of a 19 or 20-year-old boy?
Oh, one, cements everything that I've believed and heard about the LDS faith, Joseph Smith, the apostles. And then it also endears me to the brethren, like my father really pushed on us. You do not descend against the brethren. The brethren are next to royalty. And it's hero worship at that point.
It's one of the 12 apostles of Jesus.
It is.
It may as well be Jesus.
Exactly. And anything that man says is what Jesus would say.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I took that with me going into the field, and I went down to Brazil, and I was served in Sao Paulo, Brazil North Mission. And whoa, the shock. Stepping in, and I got into Sao Paulo, Brazil, went and had, the obligatory dinner with the mission president, met the mission president and his wife, phenomenal people. And then I get assigned my companion, Brazilian, does not speak a lick of English, and we get set out on the outskirts of Sao Paulo in just this rural area. And that first 2 months was tough. I remember opening my first little apartment. We walked down the side of this just run-down home, and I asked my companion in broken Portuguese, "Será que isso nossa casa? Is this our house?" And he laughed and smiled and goes, "No, ours is in the back." And we get to the back, and what it reminds me of is getting to the old swimming pool, changing lockers of an outdoor swimming pool with all these doors in a big square. And we got to these two little doors and a little chain that had come through them, a little lock, and he opens it up. And it was an 8x10 room, dirt floor, except for 4 tiles right in front of the sink, and a pair of bunk beds. And we shared a shower and toilet with 20 other migrant workers. The living conditions were deplorable. I remember laying in bed that night and feeling fleas on me for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I cried myself to sleep, and I thought, what did I get myself into? I can't do this. And I was scared like none other. And that first 2 months, I mean, the stories of getting bit by dogs, the confrontations and the heat, just the miserable living conditions, learning to speak Portuguese. And it was so tough. And I thought so many times in my mind, I don't know if I can do this. I think I need to quit. But the shame of going home I couldn't go home. And this is where I need to bring in a story about growing up, because my brother Dan, who I wish anybody that hasn't met Dan or knows Dan, most gentle, kind heart, but the guy is 6'4". John, you're a tall dude. Dan is 6'4" also, but the guy has muscles. His arms are the size of my thighs. The guy is just absolutely built. He's just tough as nails, strong as I'll get out. My sons can testify to that. I hate that word. But Dan goes on his mission to Des Moines, Iowa, after he, real rough teenage years, and gets converted to go on mission. And he goes on this mission, and just under a year on a mission, he calls my dad and says, "Dad, I can't do this anymore. I don't believe in the church. I don't believe in what I'm teaching out here." And out in Iowa, he found out some of the things that I now find out later on. And then he just doesn't like it. He says, and Iowa's a tough place to convert people. I mean, you talk about the Trail of Tears and burnt areas with where Mormons used to be. They're anti-Mormon stuff left and right is what we coined it.
It's also evangelical sometimes.
Yes. And my father told my brother, if you leave the mission, don't come home. There's not a place for you here. You don't come home. And so he stayed a little bit longer, and he wrote home and said he was still having hard times, and the answer's backward, don't come home. And so my brother left the mission, and he didn't come home. He went to California with friends because he went, like all of us do, we go where we're accepted in life. And my father was heartbroken. How could he? How could he do this to me? And he was concerned about the image of his son leaving the mission. And I remember we were in Arco, Idaho at the time. We were driving home from church, and it was the first Sunday after my brother left, and I was riding home with him. And I was sitting in the passenger seat, and my father was just angry and mad. And all of a sudden, he starts pounding the steering wheel, yelling things about my brother. And he said the words I'll never forget. I wish he would have just died. It would have been better that he died than come home. At least he would have been saved in the celestial kingdom if he would have died on his mission. And now he's a son of perdition. I wish he would have died. And he said it over and over again. And as a 15-year-old at the time, sorry. No shit. You talk about something that cements in your heart. I saw the disapproval and anger of my father. There was no way I was going to leave my mission. And so I gutted it out. I'm glad I gutted it out, though, because I learned a lot. Please.
Can I just say, this isn't like an extreme example. I mean, during my mission, there was like a month where 2 elders got sent home early. One for molesting a kid while dressing them for their baptism, and another, oddly, for having sex with like the bishop's wife on the floor of like the chapel. But the mission president called us all together, and in zone conference shared this quote from like, I don't know, Heber J. Grant or Joseph Fielding Smith, one of those dudes. And it basically said, it's better to return home in a pine box than without honor from your mission.
Yes.
So this wasn't just your dad. This was, and probably in some areas of Mormonism still is, the culture. And so, I mean, not to excuse your dad, but systems, it's systems. And this has been the Mormon system that has frankly wrecked a lot of lives and ruined a lot of families. And it's one of the main reasons we do Mormon Stories,
Absolutely.
It is. And it's the system that keeps getting propagated.
Yeah.
And I heard that several other times from other people after my dad said that. And so I knew where he got it from. And it made sense then why he felt that way. Well, it helped me understand why he felt that way. It didn't make sense. It never still doesn't make sense. Don't let me forget that.
That's not the way Heather was raised, right?
No.
It's the
Oh,
opposite,
my.
right? So not all Mormons lived that way, but some did.
And the contrast, stepping back, when I'd go to her family reunions as a teenager, to see all these sinners walking around, but the acceptance and the
Sinners
fun.
in air quotes.
Oh, yes. Well, sinners because they had beer and they had tattoos and they were not in the church or were active, or it was a different variety. But you know what? Damn, they were fun to be with. and I remember my dad talking about, it's a great and spacious building. Yeah, they're going to have a good time, but you know where your true happiness lies. So fast forward, back to my mission, I wasn't going to leave. And so I worked my tail end off, and I find myself 4 months into the mission, being made a district leader. And I became the model missionary by what the church expects. I was the quintessential white handbook. If it said it, it was black and white. I would not deviate from it. And I didn't. And
it's very militaristic, right?
Very
the
militaristic.
MTC white handbook rules.
Which was easy to do coming from
Right.
the academy to the mission. And so I held the rules tight. And so then I became a zone leader. And I became a zone leader in this one area that was phenomenal. And I got this one mission companion who was Brazilian from Curitiba, Brazil. I still have contact with him. Love him to death. Think he's a phenomenal human being. And he has African-American descent in him. And I learned so much from him. I learned about his life, where he came from. I learned what it meant to have skin a different color. I always felt bad when he longed to have my white skin because of being white and delightsome, what the Book of Mormon teaches, what the prophets taught. And he always avoided the sun. And everywhere we'd go, he'd try to stay out of the sun as much as possible because he wanted to also be white and delightsome. And I remember thinking, but you were just born, it's not your fault you're born that way. But then also remembering what the teachings of the church were. It's based on what they did in the pre-existence. And your level of your color of your skin was based on your faithfulness in the pre-existence. I did not want to believe that, especially after getting to know people. That honestly, he was the better human being than me. I became a the AP. And I did everything on my mission that was wanted. But I remember one experience specifically, and I could tell a dozen mission stories, but one that marked me significantly was, I remember we were told Elder Ballard was coming to our mission to address our mission specifically and to prepare. We needed to fast and pray, and everybody fasted in coming into this. And we weren't told to, but we were encouraged to fast, an extraordinary fast, which meant it was never put in writing for 48 hours. Have water at 24 hours and then continue your fast. So you bet it. I fasted for 48 hours going into this. And my buddy, Grayson Wilcox, I'm going to throw you out by name only because you're one of my favorite Eskimos right now that served in my mission, who definitely will be listening to this. He knows and can validate all this. We get to this conference and Elder Ballard comes. We are ready to hear the word of God, an apostle speak. And I'm ready for a Richard G. Scott experience. And I needed it at this point in my mission.
I'm going to throw in just really quickly. First of all, it's ironic, and I don't mean to break your story, but Elder Scott and Ballard both came to my mission in Guatemala in the 88 to 90 time period. So I think Ballard, I don't mean to be sarcastic, but as a used car salesman, I think he was the missionary apostle, right? That was kind of his domain. That's what he loved and he cared about. But then because Elder Scott spoke Spanish, he was also kind of the apostle to the Latin Americans. And Gerardo, we love Gerardo, and he's just encouraging me to write that Elder Scott was so intense that he would translate his talks into Spanish. And he would try and give his talks in Spanish because he spoke fluent Spanish. So anyway, and also Gerardo wanted to remind us that Elder Oaks has since been on record as saying that none of the apostles have actually seen Christ.
Yes.
So we'll probably get to that later, but Gerardo wanted to make sure, we'll come back to that, but Gerardo wanted to make sure we threw that in. So even though you're being told given the impression by Elder Scott that he had seen Christ, we now have a contradictory testimony by Oaks that the apostles don't see Christ. So that's interesting. But anyway, so both of us had the Elder Scott experience, and now I'm about to hear your Elder Ballard experience.
Spot on. And thank you, Gerardo. Thank you for your Mormon story, too, because I just ate that one up more than you possibly know. It was phenomenal. So we get to this conference, and we're sitting there. And, I get to meet the Elder Ballard, shake his hand, and everything. And I'm just anticipating this phenomenal spiritual experience. And he gets up, and it's hell, fire, and damnation. Repentance. We are not baptizing enough because you missionaries are not keeping the rules. You haven't repented enough of what you did before the mission. There are those of you here that are still guilty of grievous sins that you have not repented of. I call all of you to repentance. It was shame, guilt, damnation, just absolute hellfire and damnation, pounding on the pulpit. And I sat there.
And he wanted numbers. I mean,
he wanted,
right?
Oh yeah, right. We weren't getting the numbers. And I'm taking this personally and internally thinking, I need to do better. But I walked away there from that meeting completely deflated, guilted, and thinking, I've done everything I could. I can't do anymore. In fact, from that experience, I contacted the mission president and said, I need to confess some things. I went back and I reconfessed everything I did as a teenager to my mission president. And he goes, well, you've talked about this before. I said, yeah. He goes, well, maybe it would help if you just talk with a 70. So he put me up because I was already, serving as an AP at the time. And we were right there in Kashingi next to the temple in the church office building. So he let me meet with a 70. And I reconfessed everything again.
Scrupulosity a little bit.
It is.
Hyper-conscientiousness.
Thinking, I'm not truly forgiven my sins. And that's why, I'm thinking that Elder Ballard is preaching to me. And that 70 looked at me and said, the words that I still appreciate to this day, even though I don't think he has the authority to do. He said, Elder, you're forgiven. Speak of this no more. And that was one of the first times that true charity of just, that should have been at that time. And I pushed it away at that point. And I continue to serve. And my voice.
I just want to say it's charitable and it's completely contrived.
It is.
You shouldn't have been made to feel that awful to begin with.
Yeah,
So it's a good cop, bad cop kind of thing.
As somebody who didn't serve a mission, I was always can you explain a little bit more about the direct implication between your worthiness and somebody else's ability to receive the gospel, or that you carry the Spirit with you, that somebody else's salvation's in your hands?
It's a lot of pressure. Yeah.
Oh.
What's the message there?
I will tell you, it was preached through and through. Your worthiness, your work on the mission will directly impact somebody's ability, you to meet somebody and their ability to accept the gospel. And if you do not live up to all the rules and worthiness standards, you could be the cause of somebody's salvation or lack thereof. And so I had, growing up in a very guilted home, that sat with me like, I need to work my butt off so that there's nobody that can look at me at the last day and say, you didn't teach me, you didn't open your mouth, you didn't say that. That carries on through my adult life at post-mission. And so yes, absolutely, it was very much pushed. Other people's exaltation and salvation is dependent on your worthiness, lack of sin, and your work ethic, how much you serve and give inside the church. 100%.
Is there also, is it like quite literally taught on the mission as well that if you don't leave the house at times, you're not following the white handbook to the letter of the law, that God is not going to put somebody in your path that would have accepted the gospel, but they're missing out because you didn't follow the letter of the law? Is it that? And then twofold, is it also just like the Spirit, is not with you anymore?
Absolutely.
Well?
You can't teach if you don't have the Spirit.
You can't have the Spirit.
Or if you masturbate, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, talk about going dry for 2 years for 100%. Yeah. Absolutely. In both aspects of it. And even in zone conferences and district meetings, there would be those stories from other missionaries, because that was what we were taught of. I know early in my mission, because I left the house 5 minutes late, I did not meet this person. I had that distinct impression, and I will never do that again. And it's that virtue signaling and that comparison of I'm better because I obey the rules, and I now can teach better, and I'm in this leadership position on the mission because I now know better, I do better, but in the missionary sense.
Right, but that's what's so funny about just the way that data works is technically you could turn up the dial to 12 on a missionary. That doesn't mean there's more people who are suddenly converting to Mormonism. Right. The number should probably tell people that's not how it works. But for my husband's mission, they put him through. Everybody had to wake up an hour early and go to bed an hour later, so they were just worked to the bone. And you would think okay, you turn it up, the scrupulosity, everything else with the rules. Wouldn't that mean that more people are being found, the Spirit's stronger, all of those things? But it doesn't really translate over, right? There's never any let's see how we're actually doing. It's just how.
Well, sometimes it's the opposite. The missionaries become depressed and suicidal.
Oh, right.
Yes.
And it's not good for the numbers.
My husband had to come home for that reason.
Yeah.
The depression went through the roof.
Yeah.
The Christ-like love went down, right?
Oh, yeah. And I will tell you, there was a point in my mission, 14 months in, I hit depression. And I had given everything, and I was working my tail end off. And I remember when I got to this point, I woke up one morning. It was just before I came AP. I couldn't move. And I was one of the few apartments that had a telephone in it. And the phone rings, and it's my mission president. And he calls me, Elder, what's wrong? And I tell him, President, I'm empty. I'm done. I can't do it anymore. He said, come in the office and let's talk. And so I went in, got the bus with my companion. We went in and we talked. We talked about all kinds of things. And he had me go and spend the day in the temple and had some neat experiences in the temple that I don't need to get into here. But I sat and talked with him about how to, therapy more than anything is what it was, to get through some hard experiences to keep going. And then later on, I got called as AP, which was a great experience other than, I don't want to dog a companion here, because he is a good man. But just very different personalities, so our personalities as assistants to the president was very tough. But, getting through that mission, it was all I could do. And I got to the last day of my mission, John, and I was exhausted. I gave my all. And I remember that. And I remember, post-mission, looking back, people say, oh, it's the greatest 2 years of my life. I just want to go back. I was like, no. It was good 2 years of my mission, but the greatest 2 years of my mission are the 2 years I'm living now, and especially with Heather or with my wife and moving forward in life. But I did not want to go back. It was hard. I worked my ass off.
Yeah.
And I, by the numbers, I baptized a lot more than what they called for. But it makes me sad because knowing what I know now. I will just caveat one thing, coming back to my mission. One of the life-saving things that I had on my mission were the letters from home. Specifically, the letters from Heather. My mission president made it so I could only write her once a month. That was the rule. She wrote me every week. We have a trunk full of letters that good times, hard times. But coming home from a mission, I think a good point to jump into. Unless you want to say something.
Let me ask this really quickly. In my mission, there's a real problem with going for the numbers. Some companionships are baptizing up to 40 people in a month. The mission was baptizing like 750 people a month, baptizing 7-year-olds, drunks, children without their parents. Did you guys have...
I just had an image of drunk 7-year-olds in my head.
But probably that. But also just like going for the numbers and baptizing people that had no business being baptized, even without the discussions. Mm-hmm. Did you have any of that kind of baptism charlatanry going on?
There were, in the 2 mission presidents prior to me, that was a lot of that.
Okay.
My mission president actually came in to help clean that
all
up.
that up, yeah.
And he showed up, and I only had a couple of weeks with the new mission president. I mean, the old mission president. The new mission president, he's since passed away. I'll say his name, Ralph Dang. There's no disparaging Ralph Dang. His wife, Marianne, is still alive, and I love her to death. Okay. It's going to break her heart to find out that I left.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, Ralph and Marianne Dang are some of the kindest people you ever know. He became the mission president of the MTC in Brazil later on. But he cleaned things up. He held missionaries accountable for what were the standards. He was a great man, and he taught and loved. He wasn't the hard ass. He held the standard, but he was very much loved, and I loved him too. And nothing but great things to say about that.
Okay.
Man.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
I'm glad
but he cleaned up the mission, because we ran into a lot of people that were those baseball baptisms that went down in Brazil, soccer baptisms, because that happened all over Sao Paulo before I got there.
Okay. Yep. I'm glad you didn't have to deal with that.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Okay, you were saying.
All right, so the end of the mission comes, and it's time to come home. And I get on a plane, I fly home, and I remember, I didn't even tell the story about getting kissed by a Playboy bunny on a mission. Superfluous. I didn't ask for it. She kissed me. But we are on our way home, get a flight into Salt Lake City, and I'm getting a flight. I land in Salt Lake City, and unbeknownst to me, my father is waiting in Salt Lake City for me on a connecting flight as he's coming back from Tennessee for his job. And as we sit in the airport and talk, it was very kind, great conversation with my father. And one of those memorable times, he asked me, he goes, Kelly, what are you thinking about Heather? And I said, Dad, I love her, but in 2 years, I've changed a lot. I'm sure she's changed a lot. We've written and stuff a lot. And she's my best friend, but 2 years is a long time. I don't know. And he said, Kelly, you'll know. You'll know when you see her. And so I get off the plane. And the first person I see is my mom, which like that last 2 years of high school, my mom, everything. And I remember so much her embrace. And I pulled back. The next person I saw standing there was Heather. And all right, truth be told, my buddy Kingsley would tell me, take a drink. I am an emotional person, especially the person that means the most to me in life, which is her. I'll forever remember embracing her, put my arms around her. The feeling of that just tight embrace, the smell of her hair and everything. It was so intense. And it's one of those just top 10 experiences in life. And I remember that, and I did break the rule. I embraced her. I don't think I kissed you then, did I?
No.
I didn't. I just hugged you. But it was a magical feeling. And we went home, and I went and got released. And that night after Heather went home, my dad asked, he said, what are you thinking? I said, Dad, she's the one. And he goes, so what are you going to do about it? And so I called Heather's dad. I said, can I come talk to you tomorrow night? And I went and talked to her dad. I was scared as all get out. And that man sat with me and was so kind. As I poured my heart out to him about the love I have for his daughter and asked for her hand in marriage. And he said, Kelly, there's no one else I'd rather have my daughter marry.
Oh.
And it was the best. And this is a guy that doesn't express his emotions. So he moves forward. He says, yes. Well, when am I going to ask her? So I was very patient and planned things out and was going to wait a long time. And it was exactly 48 hours after I got back, I asked her to marry me. And I think you said yes.
I did. I said yes. I didn't know it was going to be that quick. I was hoping. And then my mom was the star of the show because we planned a wedding for 6 weeks later.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. And shout out to a brother too who paid for the ring. That's my brother Joe, who best friend in life, and he saved our son's life, but that's a different story we'll get to. But shout out to my brother there. So we got married.
We did.
And went to Utah State.
In the temple?
We did.
Idaho Falls
Temple?
Idaho
Oh,
Falls
yeah.
Temple.
We didn't talk about let's talk about temple experiences. You want to tell yours?
Oh, well, I went to the temple. You had already gone because
Yeah.
you went before on your mission. So. But I went to the temple the day I got married. And so it was a big day. It was very long.
Whirlwind.
And I don't know. I just, it was different. But I had been told over and over how sacred and special it was. And so I'm like, okay, this must mean what sacred and special is. That's what this means.
It's axiomatic.
This must be the definition. Okay. All right. I can roll with it. And I was waiting for again, like I said before, waiting for some big spiritual experience to fill whatever. And I didn't. Probably fleetingly thought a little disappointed, like, oh, this was supposed to. I'm getting married and I'm going to the temple. And
That's a bit of a recurring theme then.
yeah,
Again,
I did.
you're not feeling what you should be feeling, right?
I'm like, so, but I promptly am like, but this is what we're supposed to do. So, all right. And I just went along and stuff. And it was a pretty wild, because I was tired. It was a pretty wild day.
Yeah.
But I did it.
Yeah.
Fortunately, you did it after 1990 when the
Yes.
things were removed. the
1995
penalties and the
when we were married.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
My temple
what did you
experience.
feel like, when you went through the first time?
So there was no temple prep class, and even the temple prep class that we're given that I helped teach later on didn't really explain what was going to happen.
I did go through it. I don't remember it very much, though,
really?
but I did. Yeah.
I remember getting to the temple for that washings and anointings, and I remember going through, and that was the thing that really freaked me out. Is no one told me that you're going to get butt naked and put this little shield over top of you, and it's open on the sides, and you're walking through the temple naked, and I'm thinking, what the heck? And I had very much some modesty issues. Like I did not want to have anybody see me naked. My kids will laugh now because like, Dad's like, woohoo. Homer Simpson style. But I was very conscious about that. And then I get into the washings and anointings, and they start the washing and anointings, and this man's dipping his finger in the oil.
And touching you.
And that's what really disturbed me. As he dipped his finger in the oil and was putting on me, I went through washing and anointings later on and saw how it was supposed to be done. How it happened with me, he's dipping his fingers in the oil, and it was 3, and then it's the massaging of each spot. And it's not just the touch.
And tell people where they're touching you.
It was, if I remember correctly now, it was head, on the breast, and on the loins.
Right.
And as he reaches in and touches the breast and rubs the breast with the oil, I'm thinking, nobody's rubbed my nipple before with oil. She doesn't even do that. Just kidding.
Hopefully not. Yeah.
Word.
I joke around a lot about a lot of things, but the church stuff I would never joke around about. No, I was not at all. And so as he dips it in his finger in oil again, and then rubs oil down there, and it's in the pubic region, and it's on the loins, and it's actually in the hair region, and I'm going,
what?
This is uncomfortable. But then as I come out of the washing and anointings, and I'm dressed in the Mormon garments, my father's all there. So isn't that great on washing and anointings?
Like,
it's like, yeah. He goes, the oil, he goes, well, that's all part of it for the signs and symbols you're going to get later on. And I'm thinking, he goes, you don't have to go through that very often. He goes, it's only if you choose to go back to that. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm never going back to that. And so we go through the endowment ceremony.
It's something the church has since changed because of people talking openly and embarrassing the church and shaming the church. But for 150 plus years, that's what I went through. It's what everyone went through. And it really is creepy and gross and inappropriate. And the church did it forever until it was shamed into stopping it, which then begs the question, how is the temple ceremony a revelation from God, a direct revelation from God, if they're like changing it once they cave to social pressure because they're shamed and embarrassed? But we were all taught it was directly God to the church leaders, to us, that Solomon, the stuff that Solomon and David did in the temple back in, ancient times, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so not only that, I mean, you've come to find out that the initial washing and anointings that happened in Joseph Smith's time were completely different, and even worse. Even worse.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't have to go back through it then. But anyways, the temple, it weirded me out the first time. But it was that cognitive dissonance. You're told it's special. You're told it's sacred. Therefore, it's special. It's sacred. I will accept it and move on. And I will accept this was revelation from God and go. And, back up just a little bit. I was at the academy. I had that confrontation with the God makers about your temple ceremonies, this and that. You stole it from the Masons. And I talked to my father about that, and even Mormon doctrine, what it used to say. He's like, look, Kelly, the Masons got all those signs and symbols back from the Masonic times, when they built Solomon's temple, and it's been passed through the years. And God's not going to re-reveal something if it's already on the earth. That's why Joseph Smith had to become a Mason.
It's a restoration.
It's a restoration. And if it's already there, he's going to take it from somewhere that's already on the earth. So I thought, okay, I'll accept that. We'll come back to that later if that's okay, John.
Yeah, sure.
So I accept the temple. We move forward. And even in Logan, after we got married, we'd go to the temple about once a month in college. Mm-hmm. Despite the fact I was working full-time, going to school full-time, Elders Quorum president in a family ward, ward mission leader first, and then Elders Quorum president, because we were going to wait for a couple years to have kids.
We didn't wait that long. But we chose. We cognitively said, okay, we want children now. And so Quincy was born. We were married in 1995 in July, and Quincy was born in September of 96, our first child. So,
and we chose together. She wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and I, also growing up in the patriarchy, said I want to provide, and I will provide. I
did want to be, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I support somebody's choice in today, as long as it is a cognitive choice and not a social construct that is forced upon you. Yeah. So that's the construct we went under, and it's been great for us.
Right. I want to throw out there, I always wanted to be a mom. When I was growing up, I would love, I had like baby dolls and stuff, and I would play with them, and that's what I wanted to be. I would like pretend we were going on trips and pack their diaper bag and go sit in our car when I was a little girl and pretend we were going on a trip. And I always wanted to be a mom. And so, so for me, like I said, I went to that first year of Rick's and stuff, and I'm like, this just isn't for me. And I didn't want a career. I didn't want to go and to do that. It wasn't something I ever wanted. And so when we decided, I had Quincy, and then decided to stay with him, home for him and Kelly, gratitude to him that he worked as hard as he did to let me be able to do that, because it was something I wanted.
Yeah.
And he let me be able to do that by his hard work and school. He pretty much didn't sleep. So
That being said, though, she is the master of finances, and
right, we shared things. Absolutely.
The good financial position that we are in, we're not rich, but we don't have debt and stuff. It's because of her financial fiscal responsibility that she learned from her dad, which credits to Carol Perks for that one. So anyways, we're going through the school life, and it's tough. It's hard. I go back to my patriarchal blessing. The patriarchal blessing says you're going to be in the military. So I look for how I'm going to get into the military. Well, my dad was a pilot. He was in the Marine Corps. And so I start looking into that. And I go through the system and the process, and I get accepted into the Marine Corps. And
Did you do ROTC at Utah State?
I did, not ROTC, that's a program called PLC, Platoon Leadership Class. Okay. And what happens is you go in under the enlisted construct. And so you go in an enlisted construct, and then they send you to officer candidate school later. So I went to officer candidate school.
Why didn't you do ROTC?
Because ROTC at Utah State was only Air Force.
Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm. That's right.
And so.
And you wanted to do
Navy Marines.
Okay.
Yeah. Marines at that time.
Okay.
Right.
So you did a slightly different program. Got it. Right.
And so I get into the Marine Corps program, and I get accepted into the Marine Corps flight program. So I'm going to go be a Marine Corps pilot. I go to OCS for the Marine Corps. I crushed it. Graduated #1 in my class from officer candidate school. Came
Where
back.
was that?
In Quantico, Virginia.
That's cool.
Oh, it was badass. It was so much fun.
That's
tell you
like where FBI people train,
it
right?
is. It totally is.
Yeah.
And this was during the summer between college years.
Yep.
Like you hadn't graduated. This was during college in the summertime. And I was very pregnant with Quincy that summer.
So he's going off for the summer to do training while
Right.
you're taking care of the
yes.
kids.
So I didn't have any, but I was pregnant that summer. So with Quincy, our first.
And I go to OCS, come back, and I continue to drill on the weekends as an E3 enlisted type with the Marine Corps on the weekends until I would graduate from college. And upon graduation, then I would get my commission and go straight to what they call the basic school for the Marine Corps. And then from there, I would go to flight school for the Marine Corps. And my dreams were being fulfilled. Everything was on track. And just like...
Wait, I have to ask, did serving a mission in Brazil maybe give you an edge for OCS?
I think it absolutely did.
Yeah.
I think that heat, the crap that I went through down there, because I had some hard experiences in my mission, I think it really did. Mental toughness. I think mental toughness is one of the most difficult things to teach the next generation.
Yeah.
And the mission did teach me a lot of mental toughness.
And I would also say, Kelly has done this quite a few times in his life. He before his mission that year at the academy, they call it plebe summer, and all academies do it.
Right? Yeah.
And so it's like a basic school or where you're like drilled and woken up and marched and taught, and same thing. So he did that. He went on his mission too, and then you had Marine Corps OCS. So.
I just have to say, I'm continually reminded in all my Mormon Stories interviews that Mormonism is always such a double-edged sword, because we always talk about the hard stuff, but the discipline, the community, the morals, the values, the hard work, the ethic, the teachings of sacrifice, they can help foster excellence.
Yes.
And so it's so conflicting because, there's so much good there that comes out of it, even if it's not necessarily what it claims to be.
Which is ironic, because I've had so many people say, why would you go against it when there's so much good that comes out of it?
We can talk about that later,
Yes,
but I'm just
exactly.
saying, isn't it hard that
is.
it helped you in so many ways?
It did, and I wouldn't be who I am
foreign
without it.
language, you're graduating from OCS, what's not to love?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And OCS, talk about experiences there. I starting getting bashed on by this
Gunny.
Not the Gunny,
Officer,
Baptist, Southern Baptist, the Southern Baptist
Another
candidate,
student candidate.
just absolutely eviscerating me because I'm Mormon. And I was trying to play the nice Mormon and not hit back and be mean. So I just let him take all the Mormon taunts. And I remember one time at OCS, it was very interesting because I didn't lash back. I was very kind. And as I didn't lash back at him, we were about 4 or 5 weeks into officer candidate school. And we're in the middle of the squad bay, and everybody sleeps, dresses, everything in this big, long bay, and it's miserable. No air conditioning. And this Southern Baptist is just going off on me real bad. And finally, one of the other candidates speaks up and goes, "Dude, you just need to shut the hell up." He's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "He's Mormon, man." And he starts going off on some of the Mormon things. He goes, "It's interesting. You sit there and preach to be this Christian that believes all these Christian principles." He goes, "I'm Jewish. I don't believe a damn thing about Christ." He goes, "But yet this Mormon over here, who you say isn't Christian, never talks bad about a woman. He doesn't swear. He doesn't talk in the malicious or mean ways. He's kind to everybody. He gets out, and when he's done with his stuff, he goes and helps. And you're bashing him left and right." I tell you what, not being a Christian, if I'm looking at Christians, I can tell you who the Christian is. And I had a Jewish guy stand up for me, and I thought, damn, thank you.
That's a good general conference story talk. Right there.
Sweet.
I use that several times in church.
I'm sure you did.
But yeah, so I come back and I'm working on my mechanical engineering degree at Utah State.
It's a tough program.
Oh, it was tough as all get out. Yeah. And hats off to Utah State. It's still tough as all get out.
Go Aggies, yeah.
Yeah, go Aggies. I am in still, before there was Freedom of Information Act and stuff like that, restrictions, the Navy could get, or military could come in and get your GPAs and all kinds of stuff from the universities. Well, they got a hold of my GPA in mechanical engineering. They said, "Hey, it's pretty dang good." And I got contacted by a Navy commander and said, "You're a mechanical engineering major. You got above a 3.8 GPA. Have you ever thought about being a nuclear submarine officer?" And I laughed at him. I said, "No, I'm a Marine and I'm going to go be a pilot." He's like, "Well, I think you'd be surprised." And so he's kind of talked to me about the program. I didn't really listen. And a few weeks later, after I talked to this commander, I was talking to my father and mentioned it to him and laughing about it. And to my father's credit, he didn't laugh. He didn't say anything at the end. And I said, "Dad, are you there?" He was on the phone. And he goes, "Yeah, I'm here." He goes, "You're going to look into it, aren't you, Kelly?" I said, No, not at all. I'm a Marine, Dad, like you. I'm going to be a pilot." And despite the fallouts I've had with my father, in his wisdom, he said, "Kelly," because I've worked with a lot of former nuclear submarine officers and nuclear submarine captains. Those guys command organizations, corporations. They know their stuff. He goes, "If they're telling you you've got what it takes to do that, at least look into it. Please, for the love of it, just look into it." It's okay, Dad, I will. So I looked into it. And then as I started to look into it, I went down to San Diego and went around a couple of the fast attack submarines, talked with some submariners, and I fell in love with it. And I realized, oh, dang.
What was it?
It was the technology. I was loving my engineering degree. And I mean, you walk on board this submarine, okay? It is an engineering marvel. And I'll give you kind of the speech that I would give my brand new officers that would come down to a boat when I was captain of my submarine. I would walk down to the pier and I'd walk them along the submarine. I said, "Okay, look, in front of you here, you have a 560-foot long submarine that is one of our nation's 14 crown jewels."
There's 14 nuclear subs?
There's 14 SSBNs, the ballistic missile submarines. We have just under 100 nuclear submarines, but there's fast attack submarines, there's nuclear ballistic missile submarines. There's 3 different major classes of submarines that we have. And one that's called an SSGN, which is a special mission ops submarine, which I also served on later on. But I would tell these young officers, in front of you here is one of our 14 crown jewels. Inside of her has a several hundred megawatt nuclear reactor, a propulsion system that can propel this thing up to X number of yachts. I can't say here because it's classified. Okay. The inside of her has steam systems that run at X pressure, and I can't talk about those pressures, that has, 4,500 pound air systems, 30,000 pound hydraulic systems. It has a 3-phase ungrounded electrical distribution system. Inside of it has 24 Trident D5 nuclear missiles with multiple warheads that has the systematic power to take out nations and to protect our nation's allies. It has several torpedoes with PBNX 105 warheads on top of it that are able to, one torpedo is able to take out an entire ship. Only one. And on top
Like
of
what
it,
type of ship?
any type of surface ship.
Like a battleship.
Yeah, any battleship. On top of that, I said, we carry all the food that we need for months and months at a time, and we make our own air, we make our own water, we make our own oxygen, we clean our own air. I said, and you take all that, and we take you take a look at this incredible ship, and we take her out into the ocean, and put her in the enemy's backyard, and we submerge her down to bone-crushing depths. And the only thing that this ship can do on her own is rust. It takes people. It takes people to work together. It takes people to study, to listen, to put everything is. And we can't do this alone, and the ship can't do it alone. It needs people. So,
what about the psychological demands of being submerged for weeks, months at a time?
Honestly, when you get that close as a crew, it becomes a family. It is one of the most amazing experiences ever. And that's what I miss right now about my service. I have served all my tours on a submarine where I'm ship's company. I will never be part of ship's company again. I will, I could possibly have command of a squadron of submarines as a commodore or an admiral over a different group of submarines. However, I will never be the captain of a nuclear submarine again. Once you get past a certain rank, and you've done it, it's kind of the up and out model. So what that meant to me is when I stepped down in San Diego and saw these fast attack submarines for the first time and saw this engineering marvel and saw the teamwork that took place and saw what the officers did, both on the engineering side, the tactical side, and the strategic side, and the teamwork, and the enlisted that were there, how smart the enlisted were. Holy crap, the enlisted of the nuclear engineering and the submarine force, amazing, amazing people. I thought, this is the team I want to be part of. And I came back just wide-eyed. And this is after having,
that deconverted you from being a pilot.
Yeah. And we sat down, we wrote the list of pros and cons for the family.
Pros and cons together.
We prayed about it.
We sure did.
And we made a choice. And John, I've never looked back.
Really?
I still see those pointy nose things that go over in the sky, the Blue Angels. And I have friends that are Blue Angels pilots. In fact, one of our best friends from at the Naval Academy, he was seat number 1 at the Blue Angels until recently in town. He's at the Naval Academy. Great guy. We've talked about all kinds of things. I still have no desire to go back and be a pilot. But I sure love my submarine force.
Really?
And I love what we do. And not only, it's not just flying a jet. It's not just being in a jet. You're there, there's a team that took care of your jet. But when you're up in there, you're alone, it's not about teamwork at that point. It's about you and that joystick and what you do with that jet. And I don't mean to be pejorative about what pilots
it's
do.
amazing.
It is.
It's amazing.
And I love my pilot brother and sisters and brothers. But a submarine, it is this entire complexity. The best way to put it is it's like Star Trek. You take this thing, instead of going outer space, you put it down in the ocean. We make our own oxygen, air, everything, every aspect about it. And the engineering, if something breaks, nobody can fix it but us. We fix our own boat underway.
Something about submarines too, I think that probably appealed to you is
It's like a testimony meeting of us.
yes,
Love it.
It's very, because of what they do and the closeness that they have, just in living together and doing things together. It's like a family, and so our different submarines that he's served on, it's just felt like a family with the officers and wives and the people that we got to know, and the submarine as a whole, all the crew on it too. You're very close. So.
And that was a big thing. So in the Marine Corps, it's very, very hierarchical. Enlisted, amongst the ranks, you don't hang out together. You hang out with your same rank. The officers hang out with the officers, and the enlisted are with the enlisted. It's very, very formal. And then I went on the submarine, and all of a sudden I see that we maintain a strict formality on watch because you have to. But off watch, when you're living that close together for months and months on end, doing a top secret missions, believe me, it's a family. And what brings respect?
You're saying officers and enlisted men are all kind of...
Yeah, you all talk, you play games together, and everybody respects the rank still, but it's not this rigid formality that Marine Corps style. And those that have served in the military will truly understand this. But the submarine force, what brings respect is your level of knowledge and how well you work amongst each other, not what's on the collars necessarily. And that really appealed to me. And I think that comes back to, from my childhood days, being the fifth, that middle child, seeing this family atmosphere in the military, having it all. Oh, dang, it was so enthralling. And having the technical, the tactical. And then part of it too is we never expected to stay for a career. That was no intention. My whole desire for my military service was to fulfill my patriarchal blessing. Number one, serve in the military because I love our country, and then get out and get another job so I could be a stable dad, serve in the church, and just have a,
normal life.
Normal life. We've had far from normal. Obviously that didn't work out that way. We got inspiration to keep staying. I'm glad we stayed, but it's been difficult. But that's kind of, stepping back in college when I made that switch. That's why I made the switch. The submarine force just drew me in.
Wow, that's a cool story.
So
yeah, that's great.
And to all my submarine brethren and sisters out there, because we have females in the submarine force now, which is awesome.
Is there like a slogan or like something you would say to fellow submariners? Like,
well, it's actually each ship is independent. For mine, I would always yell out as captain, "Go Maine," and they would come back with a resounding fight. And it was just
because the Maine was the name.
Was my name in the ship. USS Maine was my ship, and I loved
you
my. You
commanded
crew.
the USS Maine.
I did,
and that was a nuclear submarine.
It was.
That had nuclear missiles on it.
Mm-hmm, nuclear missiles. And now I'm.
So you'd say "Go Maine"? What would you?
I would say, "Go Maine," and they would come back with "Fight," and it was resounding, and it was neat because even on the 1MC, which is the announcing circuit on the ship, and I'd get on and speak to the ship underway, and I'd make an announcement. I'd say, "Go Maine," and I'd let loose, and you'd hear the entire ship just yell, "Fight." Obviously, if we were in a position where you're minimizing noise, we wouldn't do that, but
sometimes just be quiet on submarines.
Sometimes, yeah, but
so you graduated from USU? Is that?
I did. Graduated
Were
from
you an
USU.
officer? You were an officer by the time you graduate?
Well, here's the interesting thing about that. I'm a glutton for punishment. Once I transferred over to the Navy and I got accepted in the Navy, and getting into that program is very difficult because every officer in the nuclear submarine force is interviewed by the 4-star at Naval Reactors.
Is that an admiral? Or?
It is. It's the force. It is. Realistically, you have the chief of naval operations and you have a couple 4-stars underneath him. The head of the guy that's over Naval Reactors is one of those 4-stars. And so every officer that works on a submarine in a nuclear capacity and also on an aircraft carrier and a nuclear capacity has to interview one-on-one with this admiral. And it's nerve-wracking. And I remember my interview. It was going in because you get a battery of technical interviews. They make sure that technically physics, chemistry, calculus, and thermodynamics, that you have what it takes. And after you meet with all these technical engineers who actually design the systems, and they give you their thumbs up, then you go and you meet with the admiral. And he does this personality type interview to make sure you're the right fit. And so I walked into the admiral's office, and I remember it's very
Is this
formal.
in Annapolis?
This is actually in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yeah. So I go in his office, and I sit down, and he has all my paperwork spread out before him.
And you're how old?
At this time, I'm 23. Yeah, 22,
Is this near
23.
the Pentagon or?
Actually, it was. It was at this time. It was in Crystal City. They've now shifted over to Navy Yard.
That's right.
Virginia.
And so I sit down, and the stories of the interviews with Admiral Rickover are just really, really entertaining.
Is he still there?
No.
Okay.
Mine was
A few
3
people who did interview
Yeah.
with him.
Admiral Rickover had a chair that the front legs were cut 3 inches shorter, and so it was very uncomfortable to sit in. He would put people in the closet. He would, if he didn't like their answer, he would kick them out immediately. He had one person
What do
talking
you mean
about.
put people in the closet?
Oh, he didn't like their answer. He'd say, "No, get in the closet." He'd stick the candidates in the closet and make them wait there while he was going through interviews with other people. Yeah, the Rickover years were notorious.
He just tortured people.
Oh, yes. Stuff that definitely is not kosher and would not get away with now. And I'm not, talking trash about Admiral Rickover because that guy did some amazing things for this country. It was just a different time.
Yeah.
So anyways, I go in for my interview, paperwork's all laid out. And that 4-star looked at me after what seemed like an eternity, and he looks up and he goes, "You're a Marine?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He goes, "First Marine I've ever had come through my office." I said, "What do you think about being in the Navy, being a Marine?" And I looked at him, I said, "Sir, if I could be on submarines and stay a Marine, I would." And he smiled and he goes, Good enough. Welcome to my Navy, son. Shook my hand and dismissed me.
Why was that a good answer?
Because normally you get grilled with all kinds of other questions. He asked me that one question and that was it. He liked my answer. The fact that, because the Marine Corps has a very strong pride in its force and its legacy and its history. And the Navy does too, but not near to the extent that the Marine Corps does. And so for me to say, hey, I want to be part of submarines and give up this legacy, this brotherhood of Marine Corps officers, that said a lot to him because he knew the Marines.
So it showed loyalty to both.
It did.
In effect. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah.
too.
And so I walked out and switched over from Marine Corps to Navy, and then found out that my Marine Corps officer candidate school was not sufficient. They made me go through Navy.
What?
Yes. They made me go through Navy officer candidate school. So I did 3 different commissioning boot camps, basically.
Wow.
And that was tough, but it was good. Well, Navy OCS was not near as tough as Marine Corps OCS.
Where's that?
It was in Pensacola, Florida at the time. They've since moved it up to Newport, Rhode Island. Okay. So got my commission, went down to Pensacola, Florida for that. Heather came the last few weeks of officer candidate school. We rented a condo on the beach. Loved it. Britton was born at that point.
He was just a baby.
Yep, he was born in Logan, Utah too. And
That's number 2?
that's number 2.
Okay.
Right, it's number 2.
And life started in a professional career. And from there, I went to nuclear power school in Charleston, South Carolina, and prototype. So for a year and 3 months, you go through some intensive technical training to get you qualified on a nuclear reactor, to get you the certificates, what you need, the baseline knowledge.
So you learned how to operate a nuclear reactor.
What we do, you learn all the ins and outs, the theory, the construction, some incredible technologies that our nation have come up with, for some very smart men and women. And you learn all that basis and how to do it, and then you go and actually do it. And then they transfer you to your first submarine, and your job on the first submarine is to qualify on that nuclear power plant and get certified on that nuclear power plant, both in port and at sea.
Why do subs need to be nuclear?
So that's a great question. So subs, the advantage of a submarine is it's the ultimate stealth platform. We can put a submarine in any enemy's backyard, hypothetically speaking. And if anybody wants to really know the true stories, wait a couple years and they'll come out in books. All right, read Blind Man's Bluff. That's a great one to tell you some of the stories from stories of the Cold War. But our submarine force is the ultimate stealth platform. No, our enemies can't see it. It can't detect it. We can get close. You have an incredible.
Isn't there radar, sonar,
So the
That's what
technicalities
stealth means, right?
I'm sorry?
That's what stealth means, right?
it is. Well,
they are better than the sonar.
So we design our submarines, especially the U.S., they're so quiet that we minimize every sound. And there's some very top secret and secret technologies that we employ to keep our submarines quiet. And we make them quieter and quieter every year. And that's part of it.
I had no idea.
Because you need that submarine to not only protect the aircraft carriers, but to also go and do a power projection forward is what we call it in the Navy. To take with warheads and put them on foreheads. Because the difference is, if I have a surface ship that can launch missiles, it can only launch them, it has to be so far away from some enemy's coastline. Otherwise, that country's missiles and stuff can come in and get that surface ship.
Or airplanes, right?
Or airplanes, whatever. If I can get a submarine in extremely close, underneath all those surveillance systems, and shoot missiles without ever being detected, and getting in on all those systems and get closer, I can get in deeper with those missiles. I can do stuff that surface ships and jets cannot under different constructs.
Even now, even in 2021.
Yes, under certain conditions, correct.
Yeah.
And that's where I'll have to be careful on some of the things I say, but we have the world's premier submarine force, and our nation invests an incredible amount. And I will tell you right now, the number one priority in the Department of Defense is our nuclear ballistic missile submarine, through and through. CNO has stated that open source. CNO is the Chief of Naval Operations. And that has been that way since Admiral Richardson. In fact, several high-level ranking leaders and Secretary of Defense have already stated it was the submarine force that won the Cold War for us because of our nuclear posturing. And our ability.
China and Russia, they're concerned about our subs
all
first
the
and
time.
foremost.
And we are concerned about theirs.
Right.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
And they're always trying to play catch up, and we watch them close. And it's great to have capable adversaries, but it's also if you've watched the news, when you see some of these submarines that will go down and sink, Russia's had some in the past few years.
They fail.
They fail.
And people die?
They lose the whole crew.
Oh my gosh.
The Russians, the Colombians,
How many will be in a crew?
Depends on the submarine.
But on average?
For my crew, it's 185 men and women. For a Typhoon class, it could be a lot more. For a fast attack submarine, you could be as low as 16, 120.
So some of these countries have had entire subs
lost. Yeah. For anybody that's out there wants to just Google lost submarines, and you'll see a list of tons of submarines that were lost. In fact, that's why we were called the silent service. During World War II, percentage-wise, the submarine force lost more sailors and submarines than more deaths than per capita of who we are than any other force.
Wow, even airplanes.
We would go to sea and they would never come back. The silent service, and it's not just because we're quiet and stealthy, but part of it too is we go to sea and the missions we fulfill. It's tough because I went and done things for this nation, which I am so incredibly proud of presidential tasking. That there's been many times I've been at periscope depth or down at depth and doing a mission set and thought, excuse my French, but holy shit, I can't believe I'm doing this. And what we do, and we train for and train for and train for, and finally go and do. And it is an incredibly professional force.
Can you give us examples of types of missions, or is that not even something you can do? No, I don't want to ever get you close to in trouble, but
yeah, and this is where I got to be very careful.
Even stuff that's already known or talked about or whatever, just to give people a sense for the types of missions that.
Let me talk about some of the Cold War missions.
Okay. This is before you.
This is before me.
Yeah.
So under the Cold War, we developed tactics, techniques, and procedures where we do intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, where you can get very close to a country, and you can imagine if we have satellites that look and see everything, and we watch each other's satellites, and everybody knows when satellites are coming over. But if you can get a little sensor to come up out of the water that can do stuff and pick stuff up, or let your imagination go wild. Hypothetically speaking, if you can have a little sensor or pick something up or do something and bring that back, it can be a game changer for us later on. When you can trail another submarine and they don't know you're there, that's a game changer. Another surface ship. Or when you can collect intelligence for a future time of war, it can be an absolute game changer. And I should probably stop there and just say, go look at things that have been open source authorized, because that's where I should limit. So and part of it is, we talk about in the church, they're secret and they're sacred. Well, in the military, there's a lot of secrets, and for rightfully so. Our secrets keep our nation safe. And we keep them at the proper and the right level with trusted, vetted people, so that we protect this nation and our allies, our national interests, regardless of the conspiracy theories that are out there. There's a lot. But I tell you, the submarine force is absolutely phenomenal. The most professional group of organization I've ever worked with. We are so hypercritical about ourselves. And that's one of the things that was very difficult in being both a member of the church and being part of the submarine forces. In the submarine force, if something's wrong, we speak up, we say something. In fact, we train all of my enlisted. Hey, if an officer gives you an order that's not right, it's illegal and unlawful, or if it's technically not right, you don't obey it. You speak up, you say something. And the reason is, it is phenomenal because we teach this culture of questioning attitude. And it's, in fact, the director of naval and nuclear propulsion, he has these 7 pillars of watchstanding principles. And one of them is questioning attitude. We teach every member of our submarine force, you have to have a questioning attitude. Watch team backup. That not only do you have a questioning attitude, you have watch team backup, meaning you're going to say something too. The other one is integrity. You're going to have the integrity to speak up, say something. And if you make a mistake, you say, I made a mistake. I love the submarine force for that very reason. The formality, the forceful backup, the questioning attitude, the integrity, the level of knowledge. These are all these principles we teach. It's absolutely amazing. But we indoctrinate, and it is an indoctrination, our sailors to believe this. And we take the average citizen from our nation and we teach them this and help them get to this point. Are we perfect? No. But that's the beautiful thing about it is when we're wrong, we say we're wrong, we speak up, we shout it out, we teach everybody, and we spread our lessons learned. That's the difference. In the church, I can't speak up. I can't shout out. I can't say this is wrong without getting censored, similar to what you've experienced and many others. And that's also drew me in. So that was a very long answer as to what brought me into the submarine force.
Yeah.
But that's what kept me in too, and the people.
And there's going to be people with different views on the military. There's going to be listeners that are like, go military, rah, rah. And then there's others that are like, ugly America. America abuses people. Military is the arm of evil in the world. And, I've studied history a bit, and I'm going to say there's truth to all sides of that. And I'm just going to say that having studied a lot about world wars, we have not had a world war since 1945. Mm-hmm. And, I learned in the Cold War, I learned about mutual assured destruction and just this idea that once everybody has enough weaponry, everyone realizing that a war means the end of everybody, then allows for us to have peace. It's kind of a weird dynamic. Mm-hmm. And I'm just super grateful that I or none of my children have ever had to go on active duty in a real war. Yeah. And that's something that multiple generations now have been saved from, because the history of the world prior to 1945 in every part of the world, Asia, Europe, America, everywhere, has been war.
Yes.
That's been, and we've had this uninterrupted sort of like 80 year era of no world wars because of, the nuclear weapons and kind of the work that you and others do. Do I have that right in your view?
John, I am so glad you know that, because we study nuclear deterrence, and that's one of our main things. So Sun Tzu, great philosopher on war, there's a lot of good quotes from him.
Art of War? That's
Art of War, yes. Yeah. And there's all kinds of people that argue how you pronounce his name, but I pronounce it Sun Tzu. Anyways, the case with that is a true warrior detests war. If you're a true warrior and you like to go to war, get out of the war business. You're not in the right. And I say that to anybody in the military. If you like war, you need to reevaluate why you're there. A true warrior wants peace. And war is the last thing we do. And the way we do is we train, and we flex the muscle so that it prevents that war. And you're absolutely right. Those nuclear weapons, as much as I would love to have a ground zero, no nuclear weapons in the world, as captain of a nuclear submarine, I owned those weapons. I was responsible for those. And my current job now, I play a very big part in where we place those weapons and what we do with those weapons and how we target and everything. And I'll tell you this, for anybody that's out there, we don't target mass populace. We shoot and we go, if we had to, and we look for the things that are going to make it so our enemies are crippled to stop war. That's what it's all about. And I can give you that, my 100% insurance. And if that gets me fired from the military, so be it. It won't. But my point with that is,
it's not about maximizing civilian casualties.
It's actually minimizing civilian casualties.
Right.
That is our entire goal, especially the U.S. The lawyers, we have so many lawyers that actually help us make sure that what we do is as civil as possible. Our goal and our job is to deter war. As a nuclear submarine captain, if I had to fire those weapons, we failed as a nation, point blank. We have failed because my number one job is nuclear deterrence, not nuclear execution of war. It's nuclear deterrence.
That's great.
And so if the longer we go, as you just stated, without a major world war, we've won. We've won because, and if you look at the number of wars you stated, the number of wars go down, the casualties from war have gone down. And even President Obama, who went in with a ground zero philosophy into his presidency and saying, I'm going to get rid of nuclear weapons. Once he saw the information and the classified information that was out there, he did what every good, smart, reasoning, thinking human being does, is they take that information, critical thinkers say, okay, I now see I was wrong. We are going to maintain a certain level because we have to prevent nuclear war. And that's what liberal, Democrat, Republican, conservative, doesn't matter. Once you see the data, that's what it is. And for that reason, I detest war. I hope we never have to use those things. And if I die and we've never used them again, I'll consider it a success, and that my life meant something because we saved lives, period.
Isn't that cool, Kara?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Is that fun to hear?
Yeah. It's really interesting.
Okay, well, there's so many different areas we can go. I guess I want to hear a little bit about, you spent 7 years in submarines on active duty away from the family or something like that? I'm curious. 6 years?
6.5 years.
I'm curious, how the family works, a Mormon family. How does that work when you're gone for so long?
Wow. Sometimes you just survive.
Was he literally away 6 years?
Not all in a row, but if he counted
what would the average length of of a mission be, or whatever you call it?
So it depended on what kind of submarine. The first tour was on the SSBNs, and so they kind of had a pretty great schedule. But I would say 3 months was
So he'd be gone 3
average.
months at a time?
3 months. He'd be home for 2 and then go
Two
again.
what? 2
2
months?
months and then go
So
home.
on 3 months, off 2 months, on 3
Yeah,
months again.
and so that was when our kids were the first two. They were little and kindergarten age, and so we just did it, sort of thing. And then when you were home, you pretty much were attached to a boat too. You still did stuff. You still trained and stuff to go on it again. So, but and also I'd have to say too, something about submarines is that when they are gone, and you don't, especially back in the day, like the first times we were on submarines, my communication with him was, they call them familygrams, and it was 50 words. We got maybe 5 of them per patrol, which is that 3-month time period, and you could take 50 words in these boxes, and you could say what was going on.
Whoa!
And
That's how you communicated with him?
Yes. And so, and in that, we could not do anything that was like, you couldn't say like sick. You couldn't even say like the kids were sick, or you couldn't even say anything that was like not going to help them on their mental state or something, anything like that you couldn't mention. So you just had to do the basics and get really good at code. But then if they looked like it was code, that was sketchy too. They would stop.
So there's no phone calls during that time?
No.
No email?
No.
So when we go on mission, we go under what we call missions control. There is no electronic transmission that will go off the submarine, because anything that you send off electronic,
detected.
magnetic, anything could be detected. And we're in a complete stealth situation. We are on collection mode only for stuff we are collecting or getting ready to shoot if necessary. And so communications are limited. And those 3 to 4 months out initially, so that 16 and a half years is a compilation of all the deployments together,
Right.
underwater, away from the home. And so when we realize just how much I've been gone, it does hit home, and you realize she was a single mother for a long time, and she kicked ass. She took names, and she raised a phenomenal family when I was gone. And when I came back, a lot of families struggle with that integration of the father coming back. And a lot of families struggle because when dad goes away, it's this sad, depressing thing. She kept me alive in the kids' eyes. And so when I came back, it was dad's home, and it was exciting, and I didn't have to be the disciplinarian right away, and I could just work into the fun, and then it was magical.
Some things I tried to do. I tried to never, even if I was having a bad day, I was sad, anything like that, I would never blame it on him. I didn't blame it on him in my mind, but I would never vocalize like that to the kids, because I didn't want to put any light in, like any idea into their mind, like, oh, dad left us or dad did this, because it's not like you wanted to. And so I tried to be positive in that way, and then talk about him. He was definitely a part of our lives. And then, and it's the people have classes for like sailors coming home and how to integrate back. But we just tried to welcome him back in. Same roles. I didn't find it as hard as I think some did. Not that I'm better than anyone, but it was hard. It was hard. There's a story I always remember that just kind of paints a great picture of one day. They had their ears hurt to the kids, and then I had something, and so I took us all to the doctor, and like there were like 2 ear infections, maybe strep throat in there and stuff, and I went to the pharmacy, and I got the prescriptions, and the pharmacist lady handed me a bag, like this brown bag this big of medicine. She's like, "Oh, honey, I hope you have some help at home." I'm like, uh-huh. And then I like took my bag and we went home, and you just do it. You just do survival techniques. We stayed inside a lot. We did we went to the library a lot, and we made it fun. I also have a thing where I'm like, I can choose whether this sucks, but I can choose to be really, really upset about it, or I can choose to make the best of it. And so I always try to make the best of it, and because I get to choose if I'm going to be like feel like crap, and sometimes you just do, and you roll with it, but then you put on your happy face and keep on going. So
yeah.
And you were living in what cities during this time?
The first one, we lived in a few. So Georgia, Kings Bay, Georgia is where
Are there subs there? Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's where his first one was. Second one was in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. So we lived in Hawaii. And then the next one, the last two were in Washington. So
Bremerton area.
So his EXO tour and CO tour were in Washington State. So
And we then, in between sea tours, you get a shore tour. And we lived in so many places: Alabama, Nebraska, Connecticut,
South Carolina,
South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Washington, Hawaii. We've lived all over the East Coast, West Coast, Central. We've lived in so many different places. And then on top of that, the travel, when I would get home and we get vacation periods, one thing that I so appreciate Heather on is growing up in a house where we didn't have money. I remember at 16, people would ask, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I would look at them deadpan and I would say, "Rich." I'm like, no, what do you want to be? I'm like, "Rich." Because I would see all the kids at school that had all this money and I didn't have it, but I saw happiness in that. So when we got married, Heather, we were going through our engagement and making lists of all the stuff we were going to do and not do in marriage. And as we were sitting there talking, the last thing she said was, "Promise me one other thing." I said, "Sure, anything for you." She said, "Promise me that when we get married, we'll focus on making experiences and not having things." And I was like, I wanted the things, but I wanted her more. And so I made her the promise. And so knowing that focus, my focus then became, let's make experiences. And so when I was home and on shore duties, we would travel, and we have traveled all over the world, and we've had some great experiences.
Yeah, so growing up too, my dad didn't make a lot of money being a meat cutter for Albertsons, but he had a fund, and he would put money every month. It would just go into these different funds. And one was Christmas, and the other was vacation. So we always would take a week vacation when I was growing up in the summer, and they weren't really far places because we lived in Idaho. So we'd come here to Utah. We'd go to Park City, or we'd go just to Lagoon and camp, or Cherry Hill and Kaysville, and we do fun. That was our vacations, but we spent the week together as a family, just having fun, and we didn't eat out a lot ever, but then on vacation we would do fun things, different things like that weren't normal in our normal lives. And then they always made Christmas super magical, and like decorations, my dad would make them, and my mom, and it was just a magical time. So I just grew up. They didn't have a lot of money, but they made it really special, like childhood and our life. So
we tried to do that with our children, and the model that her parents taught her. And we had experiences, and that was a lot of fun. And so, and as you interview our children, that's maybe something that comes out as kind of the travel and the experiences. Cruises, we would always look for cruise deals and whatever beaches we could get to. That was a lot of fun.
So when you're home for a couple months, are you working that whole time too? Because I'm thinking that's not just 8 hours a day when you're on a sub for 3 months. It's 16 to 20, maybe more hours a day. So you'd think if you were home for a couple months, you would almost think you would not have to work. Kind of like firefighters.
You're right. And that would be logical. However, the submarine force, it's intense. And it comes down manning and training and proficiency. And the way the model is set up is you're home, but you're training. And so it's very difficult to get all those times away. So we're authorized 30 days a month of leave a year. And that includes weekends that we take. And so we take them and we enjoy it. But when I'm home, I'm still working. I'm still working a lot.
That's intense.
Yeah,
so it's an intense branch of service.
Very, very intense.
Definitely.
And submariners also pride themselves on the amount of work we do. We squeeze every last bit of work out of our people.
So if I were to ask someone who is kind of really well versed in the military overall, is there a perception that submariners are kind of like top-notch soldiers, so to speak? I'm asking someone who's biased, of course.
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, Forbes 500 for quite a few years used to list as the most desirable person to hire into corporation would be a former submarine officer. The submariners, both the officer and enlisted, when they come out of the military, are sought for and hired at much higher salaries. All the headhunters, Lee Cohen, Lucas Group, a lot of the headhunters will tell you that, and it's the statistics and the data are there.
Just because the training and
the training, yep. The ability to critically analyze, to come in an organization, find problems, fix problems, technical competency, leadership. There's all kinds of reasons. Team building.
Yeah.
The list goes on. And so The joke is, in the military, you want to fix a problem, put a submariner in charge, and we'll find the problem and we'll fix it. And it may not always be fun, but we'll fix it. And so that truly is. And I'm thinking that I'm kind of a pariah in the submarine force, because most submarine officers have this super high IQ, and I don't think mine's really that high. But what I think I bring is a much higher EQ, the emotional intelligence, and which is very different. Which has got me into trouble a couple times, which I won't go into those details. But it's enough to where I watch out for my people probably more than others do. And what I've come to find out is my passion, what I thought was the technical and the tactical and the strategic, it's not. It's people. It's totally the people. I love leading people. And what gives me the most joy in life is to find and see somebody step up, get up, lift themselves up, become better, to find out that they can do better than they've done in the past, to find passion in life and to change their lives. That, to me, is fulfillment in life.
Leadership.
Yeah.
So before we bring your sons on, I guess I want to say, is there anything else about your military service that you want to talk about? And then let's move to kind of church and do your church journey up until the point where we want to have your sons take over. Does that make sense?
That's perfectly fine, because I would love to get off the military part too.
I've loved this.
I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah,
I appreciate
super
that.
Super interesting, yeah.
The military, I've been living this now for 25 years. At some point, we'll hang up our hat and retire and figure out when that's going to be. But from the military side of the house, it's been one of these things where we never expected to stay. We never expected to make a career of it. But having done so, the growth that has come from it, the experiences are absolutely incredible. And what we've gone through together, what we've grown together, I wouldn't change it.
I also feel something that I'm very grateful for, and that is the opportunity. I never imagined growing up that I would live so many different places. I guess it wasn't very imaginative. I just imagined I'd live in Idaho for the rest of my life, have a, same as my parents sort of thing, and grow up like that. But the opportunities it has given me to live so many places and to meet so many people and to see so many different ways to live. And so, and just how great people are, and not just the narrow view of just, because Idaho, like I was saying, it huge, like Mormons, that's all I was around, just that view. I had that view of life, and the military has given me such a wider view of people and life and humans and how great they are, and I love that, and I'm so grateful for that.
You've enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
I will. Mark Twain said something that's very interesting, and I'm going to butcher the quote a little bit, but if you want to remove prejudice, travel.
Travel is fatal to prejudice.
Travel is fatal to prejudice. Yeah. And the military travels and have been incredible for us, because not only have we seen the world in our Navy travels, but we've also seen the best that the world has to offer. That's one of the things I love about the military, is what it does is it brings, it's a melting pot of white, black, orange, yellow, Asian, straight, gay, lesbian, transgender, you name it, you bring it, every background, and you bring all these people from all these diverse backgrounds, and you put them together in a shell or in a hull or in a ship or a unit, and they have to go and then train together, learn to fight together and become, and all of a sudden, your eyes start to open, you realize, dang, I may not be as special as I thought I was. I may not have had all the right answers. My culture is not necessarily perfect or right. And you start to see and value people differently. And that's been incredible.
Can I just say, I've studied a little bit about U.S. history, and I think one thing people don't know, and I think it was Eisenhower, but the U.S. military has played a really important role in advancing civil rights in the United States, because at some point, I think it was around Eisenhower, World War II, or right after it, they integrate the forces where blacks and whites are serving together. And that was an important sort of milestone to then help the rest of the country become more comfortable with frankly, whites and blacks.
Yeah.
And even men and women sometimes working together. So
you are spot on with that. I remember in 2008, we were at the War College, and the Tuskegee Airmen, the remaining survivors, came and spoke to us. And
These are
afterwards,
men of color that were airmen, right?
yes, they were World War II pilots.
Yeah.
That this special group of pilots, but they were put in their own little wing because they're black and they didn't want to integrate. And their stories, but to listen to their stories, and they fought for our country, and the stuff they did, and the prejudice that was still levied against them, even after the war. And I thought,
Didn't we experiment on those guys, like with some unethical experiments?
I don't know about the Tuskegee Airmen on that one, but if there was, but I know that their personal stories of valor
Yeah.
and absolute love and belief for this country and fighting for civil rights. And I grew up in a home where, because of the Ezra Taft Benson philosophy, which is, and then our doctrine, blacks are, it's a mark of Cain. They're less than.
They have to be inferior,
Yeah.
according to a Mormon.
But then as I go out in my mission, I go out in the military, some of the absolute best officers enlisted out there are blacks, Asians, fill in the blank. It's not just white. The whites do not have
LGBT, right?
LGBT, right? And even in the military, I remember, the military was a very homophobic place for a long, long time. We could not talk about anything other than joking around about it. But if somebody came out, if you came out and found out you're gay, they were kicked out immediately. Then it was the Clinton policy of don't ask, don't tell. And then I lived under that for a long time of the don't ask, don't tell. And I remember a situation on one of my submarines, and I'm going to protect the individual, but he was a phenomenal sailor. In fact, on several of our mission sets, his recommendations as an enlisted sailor are what saved the ship from getting counter-detected and putting ourselves in a real bad position. But this guy was, he was the model sailor. In fact, we advanced him because of how good he was. And during a time after watch, when we're still in the Badlands, we're doing after watch cleanup and cleaning the ship because we have to clean the ship after every watch. The ships we keep immaculate underway. And I find this piece of paper, and I open up this piece of paper, and I look at it, and my heart sinks. Because what it is it's a letter from an officer to this enlisted. And they're gay. And this is the don't ask, don't tell period. And I realized...
You're an Orthodox believing Mormon.
Orthodox believing Mormon. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh, damn, what do I do? And talk about a moral conundrum. What my church teaches me is this. What my military obligation is this. What I see in front of me is a sailor that is absolutely vital to my ship.
And a human being.
And a human being that I love as a human being. And I had to make a moral decision at this point.
There's something that's got to give.
Something's got to give. It's like dissonance between how am I going to resolve this? Am I going to? And so I walked up to him. And that boy, as I called his name, he jumps up, he pops up, and he's like, "Yes, sir," just like a good sailor does. And I pulled that piece of paper out and I showed him and held my hand. And his eyes go down and look at it, and he goes white, and he realizes, and he grabs for his pocket because he realizes that as he was cleaning up, that letter fell out. And he's mortified because he now knows that I know that he's gay.
And if you're discovered at this point, what happens?
He gets kicked out. Next port of call, he's off the ship.
You're kicked off.
He's out of the Navy.
Out of the Navy.
Uh-huh.
That's intense. I don't think people realize that was the policy.
That was the policy. And once again, when you know better, you do better. The Navy figured things out, and they got better. But they also apologized for the wrongs they did. We'll come back to that. It's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
As I held that letter and that dissonance between my lives in my head, I put that letter out. He takes it and he puts it in his pocket, and I put my hand out and I shake his hand and pull him in and give him a bro hug. And I just said, "Be careful. I need you." And we never spoke of it again. Until, on the ship. He's still in the Navy, and he still has a very high-ranking enlisted. And he has
the rules were you should have booted him.
Oh,
right?
I should have booted him.
Yeah.
But we didn't. And I still stand by that decision, even if somebody wants to kick me out today for that.
Yeah.
Why? Because it was morally the right thing to do. And fast forward, and that's what we'll get to next. If I would have done the wrong thing, how could I look at my sons in the eyes after I found out that they're gay? I couldn't have, that would have eaten me up, John. moral rightness does not come from an institution. Military, church, civil, moral rightness is how we treat one another. At the end of the day, are you a better person because of my interactions with you and vice versa? And if that's the case, that's morally right. And that's where I stand.
Man, I'm glad you made that call for your sake and for your sons and for him. And
we have a ton of military stories I could tell. And that's one thing I've promised Heather, post-military, I'm going to write a book. I've got a ton of stories I'm going to write down. And those Navy experiences are fun. And I'm looking at a list of them right now. One of which I'll get into but later on, but it's more coming into the academy's time frame, serving at the United States Naval Academy.
so when you leave kind of commanding
Yeah.
submarines.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just put a note in there. So from 2015 to 2018, I was the commanding officer of USS Maine, a nuclear ballistic missile submarine. That tour in and of itself was the most magical, fun, hard, intense, crazy, exhausting, inspiring, overwhelming, life-changing, absolutely phenomenal experience of my life next to being a father and husband.
I mean, even if you're an admiral, I'm guessing that you have to have served your time commanding a submarine, right?
Yes, for the most
It's
part.
like getting your wings as a pilot.
And it's interesting you say that because all of the admirals and flag officers will flat out tell you, my best tour was command of a submarine, command of a surface ship, command of an air wing. Command is the best. It's not because it's about the power. It's about the difference you get to make in the lives of people. You set the tone of the command. The personality of the ship is the personality of the commanding officer. And yes, I did bring a lot of my Mormon principles in, not overtly, but who I am. Care for your people, love for your people, service to your people.
Unrighteous dominion. Lack of unrighteous dominion.
Yeah.
Try not to.
to.
Wield unrighteous dominion.
That it's not about the position. One of the things I told my people, all my sailors, and I told all my midshipmen at the academy this is, I want some principle I stand on. Life is not about, happiness is not power. It's not about position. It's not about pride. It's not about prominence. It's about people. That's what life's about. And if you want to find true happiness, forget the position, power, pride, prominence, possessions. Forget those 5 P's. Go for the P of the people. That's where happiness is at. And even amongst all we're going through now, I will still say happiness is the people. Because at the end of the day, position goes away, power goes away, pride goes away, hopefully, prominence goes away, and possessions do too. But the difference you make in somebody's life will never be forgotten.
So you commanded the Maine for 3 years?
3 years.
That's a long time.
It is.
And how many of those class of submarines are there?
14.
Only 14.
14.
So for all the people that serve as submarine officers or enlisted or whatever, only 14 at a time, or only a small percentage end up commanding a submarine.
You have a better chance of becoming a senator or a representative in this country than a commanding officer of a nuclear submarine.
Really?
Statistically.
Wow.
And some people say, well, it's harder to do the other one. I would say, well, I'll challenge you on that one. Go be a nuclear submarine captain. And I will shout out there. A lot of people say, well, it's all about the officers. I will tell you this. Shout out to my enlisted. Never, ever forget the enlisted. It's on the backs of the chiefs and the enlisted of our Navy that the Navy goes to sea. Through and through. The hard job is held by the enlisted and by the chief petty officers. So to my chief petty officers and my enlisted out there, thank you for what you did because you made my tour possible. And I love you through and through, and I'll forever salute you for that. And I got a lot of my crew that are excited to hear this interview. Partially because I was so TBM while I was captain and to see me come out. So.
All right. What else do you want to talk about before we bring your sons on? I was going to ask you this, Heather. So this is a patriarchy. Mormonism is a patriarchy. Your patriarch's off to sea. Like, how is religion going on in your household while the patriarch is off to sea so much? And then let's usher that into kind of your Mormon lives as a Mormon family.
So, well, maybe we'll ask the boys when they come up. Maybe they have a different view of it than I do. I did my best. When they were little, we read like Book of Mormon stories to them, the little picture ones, or like comic books. And so we did things like that. And I always went to church with them, even when Kelly was at sea. I never missed. I always would go, even if and with them, just me in tow.
It's not fun to take 4 kids alone.
No,
to church.
it's not.
Margie will
And
testify to
we
that.
did it a lot, but we did it. We went to all our meetings, and I did. I had callings that were different ones. When we lived in Georgia, I was Relief Society president for a time, or in the presidency for quite a time, and I always say my daughter probably thinks that her second home was the church house, because I was there so often. I had the key and had to go in and do stuff. And when she was little, her and I were at the church house. But I just did it. I just okay, this is what you do. And I did it. And it wasn't bad. I was grateful. It was a good community. People were, if I needed something, that's where I found, there were people on the boat that I knew, wives and things that were from the boat that I could ask help for. But the people if I ever needed help, I would ask it of people from church, and I felt like I could. So
I'm going to brag about Heather on this one, because she underplays what she did. The wife of the commanding officer takes care of the families when we're gone. She absolutely took care of all of my families. We had 49 babies that were born to my command during those 3 years. Yes, bunny rabbits, sailors are. But every one of those families received a blanket that was hand sewn by her and her mom, with the USS Maine emblem on it, and little submarine and stuff. And we would take a package and little different things to every one of those families and the newborns. We held every one of those newborns for the most part on that submarine. And she would serve and take the phone calls and help the young families and the young wives, the young enlisted. And then on top of that, she always served in the church. We were a family. We did scripture study every night as a family. Scriptures, prayers, song, articles of faith. Kids, we did 2 articles of faith every night, always. And she continued doing that. She served as Young Women's President, Relief Society President, counselors in every one of those organizations. You name it, primary, she's done it, and never turned down a calling.
But there were good things. It taught me, I think, I do credit, especially that first time, like having little kids, you being at sea, being the Relief Society president. Like I told you, I was shy. I credit the military and church callings like that, being so far away from maybe Utah and Idaho and serving in those kind of things, with definitely breaking me out of my shell a bit and forcing me into things that I'd never thought I could do, and having to speak up and do things and do situations that I didn't want to have to take care of, but I did it because I just had to. And so it helped, and I'm grateful for that. It has shaped me into who I am today, and I like who I am. So I'm grateful for those opportunities. So.
The last thing I'll say about the military career, as hard as it is, the thing I hate in life most is being away from her. And we've talked about how we hate separation. It's not easy. And, but we always felt like it was a duty, it was a calling in life that we were supposed to go and do. But I will tell you, the closeness that we have in our relationship, because we value that time, every time that we've got together. Yeah. People laugh. I always tell people, we don't fight in our marriage. And you can ask my boys the number of times they've heard us fighting. We don't fight. But I credit her because she brought into the relationship this mutual understanding. Let's talk. And it's just this deep desire to be the best for the other. And I know for some couples that's not healthy, but for us it is. And we have one hell of a relationship and friendship. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, boys, you're good. You're fun to be with, but.
That's beautiful. I've kind of maybe a left field question a tiny bit. Like, I'm trying to imagine, like I remember when I worked at Microsoft, I'd be gone a couple weeks. It was hard.
Yeah.
And I would say that for a lot of men, probably I'm sure women too, especially type A kind of men, that, you know, being sexually active with a partner or spouse and sort of like knowing what that is and having that be a part of your life, and then having to be away from them for 2 or 3 months at a time. I mean, that I'm trying to imagine what that would be like. Like for me, it was hard to be gone a couple weeks. And then there's the Mormon layer of like what you're not supposed to do when you're away. And then also there's this perception that you might have not only of businessmen, but also in the military of like military men at foreign ports doing whatever they do to be able to kind of meet their needs, whether it's sex workers or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, strip clubs, you know, I don't even know how to talk about it other than to say it must be super interesting to be a type A alpha male at sea 4 months at a time without being able to have sex with your wife. And I imagine as a woman, it's maybe depending on the woman, it's not great to be home and to have your husband gone for all. And there's probably stories of infidelity, of wives staying home and being alone and you know, how do you deal with those needs? So I don't mean always come back to sex, but at the same time, I think these are real things.
It's a
Is there
huge
anything
part.
you guys want to talk about?
And the layer of being Mormon and the rules
my
against
gosh.
masturbation. So I'm glad you asked that. That's kind of a curious
There's
question.
actually several parts.
You guys were making a lot of facial expressions the audience didn't see to validate that I was asking
That is the spot on right question, John.
relevant questions, right?
'Cause this is a 3.5 interview, and I'm getting a little bit like,
And,
I miss my husband.
yeah,
It's
and
TMI. It's a joke, but anyway.
you're right. And it's probably a good
It's a
time to bring
long
my
working
sons in
day.
because my bladder's full too.
We'll take a break after that.
No, it's good. I'm going to let Heather answer for her, and I'll let her answer last because because it is. I want her perspective in this one definitely, but we've talked all about this. But I want to back up on a military. The question that wasn't asked that I want to answer. Mormons in general do not do good in the military for many reasons. The culture of the Mormon church and that the virtue signaling, I cannot be around people that swear, I can't be around anybody that has, talks about pornography, I can't be around this or that. Work on Sunday. It's too hard on the family. They don't have family values. Majority of Mormons that come in the military wanting to serve the country, hoorah, came in with the same ideals I did. I'm just going to come and get out. And they do find that it's too hard to maintain their morals, and they do either get out of the military or they get out of the church. It's one of the two.
I didn't know that.
Oh, there's very few that stay. In fact, you see that in the wards. In the military wards, we are constantly trying to reactivate, those that are on the rolls.
So many just going active.
Oh, so many going active. And it's for those very reasons. And it is tough. The military training is tough. And you're dealing with a very type A alpha male, and the females that are there too are very tough individuals. They're tough. I mean, the females that worked for me, incredible, smart individuals, but driven, and they can give an order, and they can be tough when they need to.
You'd have to be.
And so that is not congruent with a lot of the lifestyle and patterns of the meekness and the humility, sensibility,
the Mormon sensibility,
and sensitivity. And so we've often commented that a lot of the males that actually you see stay in the church for a long time are actually type B personality, which is very docile and meek, and you don't get that type A personality. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong. There's qualities to both. That being said, once you come in, a lot struggle with the fact that, wait, I'm deploying and I've now had sex with my wife and I'm not supposed to masturbate. I can't do anything. I can't look at porn. And it's once you've partaken of that fruit, and Heather knows how much I love sex. And I'm open and honest about it. We talk to our kids about it. We talk with friends about it.
Would you say earlier that you went through the libido line a few times in heaven?
2 or 3 times you said in heaven.
Yeah.
Greedy.
Oh, in our engagement, I told her, I said, I want to be open and clear that sex is going to be very important to me. And I just want you to know you're marrying somebody that is going to want to have sex a lot. And she said, bring it. Now, her libido was not what mine was. There's been a little bit of a change there, but that's later.
You're so old.
I know. But, at first, it was very important for me that every time I had an orgasm that she did too. That was very important to me because my mom didn't have an orgasm for the majority of her marriage. And she told me that about the first time she did.
Mine too.
And that blew my mind. And to me, that's very selfish of a man. And if you're a man out there, take that for what it is. But, you know,
And you like women.
yeah, and you like women, that's right. Man or woman. Let's just say partner. Your partner should be sexually satisfied if that's their choice, their desire. Do not make it all about you. Sex is about a joint relationship. But also your sexuality is something you give to somebody else. That's something we learned later on. But for me, it was sex. The only person I could have a sexual thought about, and the only person I could have a sexual interaction with was with her. No masturbation whatsoever. That first submarine tour, nothing. I never looked at porn. I never masturbated. Nothing. There's nothing. Zip, zilch. In fact, when I found porn lockers with the other officers, I would take them and throw them out. Yes, I was that guy. And when we finished that submarine tour, and I was going crazy, and we were praying as to what to get out. We were actually praying about what job to take, and we got our answer. We're supposed to stay in the Navy. I told her, I don't know how I'm going to do this, honey. I'm going crazy, and my next tour is going to be on fast attack submarines, and those are 6 and 8 month deployments.
It's probably not natural.
I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I'm going to explode. And I said,
Probably not healthy.
I definitely agree. But I would get underway, and you know, you get a couple months away without sex, and I feel like I could just rip somebody's head off. And I'm not a yeller and a screamer. And so we get into this, going into the second tour. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this, honey. And we talked about it. And I have a very wise wife that says, Kelly, our physical relationship, our sexual relationship is ours and nobody else's. They don't need to know. She goes, when you're away, think of me. When you're away, kids are going to laugh. We've got all kinds of little thumb drives and hard drives of different pictures. Yeah. Well, they know to avoid them. Of times of us, of pictures and things together. And you know what?
They haven't seen that.
No, when you said they know.
No, they just,
like-
because we're like,
But we joke about that now.
I found things of my parents, so that's why I'm like, they know.
no, I don't
we have bond,
think
we need to bond in our trauma, boys.
put
Oh my
that.
God.
But how freeing is it though to be able to talk about that with our kids now? But also, like, I think I would have gotten crazy without that. Mm-hmm. So yes,
Your Orthodox believing Mormon wife basically did what?
We made pornos together.
And she
God.
gave you permission.
I gave you
masturbate.
permission to enjoy yourself, have fun, to let that tension out.
She did, and I did. And not a lot of people know that. In fact, there's people I would never have admitted that to before I left the church. And it was one of those things that we decided, hey, for us, that's ours. And so when that was probably a little bit, that was one of those shelf items that we put up there. And maybe a little bit of a crack in the shelf. That we weren't doing what the TBMs were supposed to do. And, oh, by the way, that continued on while I was in bishoprics.
Of course.
And serving as ward mission leaders and everything else. And I never felt guilty for that once I finally got over it. Because it was her and I. My thoughts were on her. Yeah. I wasn't looking at somebody else. And so...
What about the ghost of your dad and Bruce R. McConkie?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Hopefully, I think if you would have been thinking about them, then nothing would happen.
It's interesting because I remember finding out that my mom caught my dad. My sister told me this. My mom caught my dad masturbating one time.
What?
And how mad she was at him because that was not
Drop
ours.
the F-bomb on him?
Yeah,
Oh,
Judas.
it was scandalous. And my mom was so mad, and my sister was so disgusted with my dad. And I'm sure my brothers and my sister are going to be all mad at me for revealing family secrets. But that's okay. That's all right. That's okay.
It's all to normalize it, quite honestly.
Yeah,
We're not trying to be gross, but
Absolutely.
this kind of stuff models well that like these things are actually quite kosher. Like, let's normalize this.
It's exactly. Let's normalize. In fact, that's the biggest thing. Let's teach people there's healthy ways to do it. It's between a couple of what is safe and consensual. And that is what needs to happen.
It has to be that your dad was mad at you because he was mad at himself for behaviors that he was ashamed of. I mean, doesn't it have to be that way?
John, you were
Clinical
spot on.
psychologist here.
Oh, sorry.
I think that I really think that's the reason why. I think that's he projected all of his guilt upon us.
Yeah.
I know that
Yeah.
my brothers, my sisters will tell you this, and my kids will say this. Of the 8 kids, I'm the golden child. I did everything he wanted me to do. I served the mission. I was served in the callings. I became a high priest at a very young age. I did everything that he wanted. I became a submarine captain. I achieved a rank in the military. He didn't. And he was so proud of me. And then for me to walk away from the faith.
Oh, we can't get there yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where we'll I'll pause on that.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah. But I'm going to let Heather talk her portion.
Oh, I just remember, I viewed it as, okay, let's put it this way. With Kelly, I really, really have never felt worried or that he was going to cheat on me or he was going to not be thinking of me or be thinking of somebody else or not, because just of who he is a sharer. He tells me everything. And he also is just very loving and very vocal and in telling me and his actions too. And so I just trusted that he would be faithful to me. And
Was it hard for you to have him gone for months at a time?
it was sort of, I would have to say my libido physically
Or mentally, emotionally?
Mentally and emotionally, yes. Physically, yes, but definitely not so
Not the
much.
same.
Maybe like towards the end, I definitely would. But I was surviving kind of when he was gone, and it really didn't come into much play, to be honest, with me. That's just my part in it. So,
And for me, it was always on the forefront of my mind. And I mean, stiff wind, and I'd look at her and see Heather, and we would, and she was so gracious to me. And there was,
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I don't enjoy any of the. It does not at the as much at the forefront of my mind as it was you.
and we've had I think that we've had a phenomenal sex life.
I think so too. Hell yeah!
Sons are loving this.
We've talked about it with them. They all know. We joke about things.
Love to make them uncomfortable.
We'll have to tell them where they were each conceived too.
Okay, so what else do we need to talk about before we bring your sons on? Let's talk about, I think we need to set the context for the religion part. In other words, what would you say your beliefs were up until the time where your sons are going to start telling their story? Were you doubting? Were you orthodox? Were you in it to win it church-wise?
In it to win it, I'm going to save, there's one thing that cracked my shelf. I'm going to wait until after they're interviewed to bring that in.
Okay.
But we were 100% in it to win it.
Bishoprics, right?
Bishoprics.
You served in multiple...
Yeah, multiple bishoprics, both as counselors, as executive secretaries, as clerks. I've served 7 times as ward mission leader because I absolutely believed I was gung-ho. They would see me, this guy...
You were a zealous missionary?
Whip him into shape.
I was zealot. I was an absolute zealot. Preach the gospel, find people on the list, let's bring them back to church. Young men's presidents multiple times, scoutmasters, Eagle Scout, all 3 of my boys are Eagle Scouts. We were in it every activity.
What about combining your love for cadets or military service with the church? Did you play a role in supporting Mormon? Would you call them cadets? What would you call
midshipmen.
them? Midshipmen.
Yeah. So at the Naval Academy, they're called midshipmen. And when we truly believe the reason we were called to, I got the job at the Naval Academy was because we were called to help LDS midshipmen. When we got there was anywhere from 6 to 8, sometimes 10 that would show up on a Sunday inside the ward. And
where was this again?
In Annapolis, Maryland.
Okay.
And
the Naval Academy?
At the Naval Academy. Okay. And I became a battalion officer out there where I was in charge of 750-ish midshipmen in my battalion. But then I was called to also work with all 4,400 of the midshipmen. And I believed my job was to get involved, to get to know them, to love them, help them build their leadership on the military aspect, help them figure out what job was the best job to pick. For me, it was submarines. But honestly, I'd help them figure out which the best career path would be in the military. But mainly, if you were to ask me between military obligations and commitment and church obligations and commitment, which took precedence? Church. Every time. Every time.
As much as the military mattered to you.
It did. And because I believed that eventually the military would go away, but the church would stay. Mm-hmm. And so I would make sure I wouldn't overstep bounds with the midshipmen. But midshipmen that were LDS on the records, we fought to bring them back. Just before COVID hit, we organized the first LDS midshipman branch with 45 to 50 active midshipmen. And I did that with Ken Niumatalolo, And the bishop that was out there at the time, Ken Nimpatololo, was the Navy football coach and state president out there at the time. He still is. Good friend, love him. You'll never hear a disparaging word out of my mouth. In fact, I've got a couple stories about him later on. But we worked every day. There was not a day off. And Mason knows this especially because at the Naval Academy, we were given a house that was right on the grounds of the parade ground. It was this massive 18th century home that was 4 stories and all these rooms and fireplaces in every room, just grand, old, beautiful brick home. And every weekend, the midshipmen in our home, every night there were military functions we'd go to. It was the busiest job I think we've ever had.
It was exhausting.
And it's mentally exhausting because you're engaging with people all the time. And I'm an extrovert and I hit the level of the limits of my extrovertness. But Heather cooked, baked, helped, loved, supported, went to all these functions and loved the midshipmen with me just as much. It was a full-time job between the two of us. So yes, we were there. We truly believed it was a calling from God.
Were those happy, beautiful memories? Or?
There are a lot that were. I was just talking to the boys about this. There were a lot that weren't, just with kids' lives, like poor Ashley and Mason and their school situation, and even Church Mason. He'll talk about that.
We'll hear their perspective.
But I did love the midshipmen. I mean, it was that they're college age kids, right? And they're my kids' age, and I just loved. They're excited for life. They're starting out, learning, growing, and so I love that part about them and to visit them. But it was exhausting. It was so exhausting because it was 24/7. Like, couldn't. Not that I come out of my room in my underwear with my kids there, but I really had to think before I walked out of my room. There are always people there, always in the house.
We shared
the kitchen, anything. So
we shared our lives and our home consistently and constantly with everything, and our children's lives. And they got to meet some incredible people. I mean, I don't know if you remember the story of the Belgium, the missionary that got Mason Wells. He was one of my midshipmen. He just graduated this year. And
what happened?
He was caught in the bombings when he was a missionary.
We have listeners that are parts of these families.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And they're a great family, and we're still good friends with them. And this interview, I guarantee you, is going to be a shock to a lot of my midshipmen that don't know that I've left the church yet.
Because they looked up to you. Because it goes without saying that serving at the Naval Academy is a real honor. It's like serving at West Point or the Air Force Academy or
It is. And it is so competitive to get there, to be an officer, to be selected there. The screening process, difficult. And for me, getting there, it was a fulfillment of a dream true because I always felt like I was going to graduate from the academy. And then I go to the academy, I leave to go on my mission. On my mission, I get that answer, I'm not supposed to go back. But I always wonder, I thought I was supposed to graduate from the academy. Mm-hmm. And then years later, I go back to the academy as a battalion officer. And I served there for 2.5 years. So 3.5 years of my life I've spent at at an academy.
Is that good for your career in the Navy to serve there?
It is.
Yeah.
And so while I'm there, it's taken me back, and I fall in love with not just the LDS midshipmen, but all the midshipmen. And we have some of the most incredible stories. And it was extremely touching for me. In 2020, the class of 2020, when they graduated, they voted me as the honorary grad for the class of 2020. And I got a graduation certificate. I got a class ring.
Oh.
And so I am now a graduate of the United States Naval Academy at the age of 45.
So a year ago, were you guys, maybe a little more than a year ago, you guys were still active in believing?
I was in the bishopric in June of last year.
This is crazy.
So
You had something published in the church news I just looked up as recently as January 2nd, 2020.
Oh, were you guys written up in the church?
We were in the church news. Oh, this was another part. We in the church news in January of 2020. Thank you very much. Actually, if you just Google my name, there will be all kinds of little articles and Facebook posts.
L-I-A-N-G-E.
L-A-I-N-G. Kelly, Kelly, Laing.
Cool. There's a lot of pictures to go along with the stories you're
and then the
telling.
church is going to take all these articles down.
Oh, I've already asked them several times to take it down, and they haven't yet. So I'm sure after this interview, it'll get scrubbed. But yeah, so I was published with a story back in the Ensign years before that, from a story when I went down on some cross training with the Brazilian Navy. I got to ride Brazilian submarines and surface ships and did some really neat things because I spoke Portuguese, and that helped me get down there. Had an incredible experience, wrote it up, got published in the Ensign, that experience was very interesting. All the scrubbing that they do and the edits they do. But
I've heard that many times.
oh my gosh. But then I got also published in the church news as, the submarine captain that how he keeps his faith. And I was at the time really struggling to keep my faith, still serving in the bishopric, because I already knew at that point I had one son, I didn't know it two, one son that's gay, and I will let him tell his story at that
Come
point.
back to that, yeah.
And I was struggling, but I was also fighting tooth and nail to keep my testimony. I was reading my scriptures up until June of last year. I finished the Book of Mormon the 40th time in my life. Last June. I kept a tick mark in the scriptures that were given to me just before I went on my mission. And I was trying through and through. In fact, in February of last year, I gave a talk at the Naval Academy at Annapolis Ward about don't give up the ship. The motto of the Naval Academy,
Stay in the boat.
don't give up the ship.
Exactly, stay in the
And I was fighting to keep my faith. But then right after the new year, right after I was published in the church news, I had one of my midshipmen die right in front of me. That I was so stressed and I was so busy and I was working so hard with those midshipmen. And all my midshipmen will know, Duke, and to Duke's mom, who I know is going to hear this, and my midshipmen, you and your boys still mean the world to me. He died in front of us running a physical fitness test. He had a heart defect. We didn't know. We've come to find out later. But the tragedy of going through that and having his two brothers at the academy. One, can you imagine a family has three kids at the Naval Academy at the same time? Twins and another. Talk about a phenomenal powerhouse family. Amazing. But have one of the kids die. That experience and going to the hospital, being there when they pronounce them dead, as they're giving CPR for over an hour, and getting through that, and then helping all my midshipmen who were there, who saw it, who loved and knew this midshipman, to get through the grieving process. That was absolutely knocked me off my feet. Then a second midshipman that dies a couple of months later. We don't know I'm sure the autopsy has details. I don't know if it was part COVID or what. A football player that I knew. I wasn't there when he died, but he still nonetheless knew him. To the situations with my sons, and that will be what breaks my shelf to start looking. And that's probably where I need to let them take off. Because I'll probably get too emotional at this point.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Kara, isn't that cool?
Yeah. I feel how genuine both of you are, from like your early years and your dedication to one another and to doing the right thing. It's
To our
really
country?
coming to our country, to doing right by your family is like in your community. Like that's really coming through. And I feel like I'm in a warm blanket of hugs already. Just like you guys are just really genuine, beautiful people. So that was a good story so far.
One thing that we didn't mention is that you have an awesome TikTok channel. And one of the most powerful TikToks you've shared is the one about being a lazy learner. Mm-hmm. And I just mentioned that because like when you say you read the Book of Mormon, 40 times?
Yes.
You weren't a lazy learner. And so that's you kind of do this tongue-in-cheek TikTok video.
I do.
Where you talk about that the church would call you a lazy learner.
I do. And so thank you. Well, Kara, I will tell you this. You were my inspiration first to get on
Really?
TikTok. Yeah. Yes, you were. And then when John made the call, I was like, I'm going to do this. I want to do this. And then John made the call out because of the Brad Wilcox video.
Yeah.
That one infuriated me.
Yeah.
But I was going to stay quiet. I was not going to get up and speak out. But then some of the attacks started happening before we got on social media. And I was like, just getting angry. And I'll get into this later, but there is definitely the stages of grief, but I'll get through that. But I remember when Brad Wilcox watched that video, I was just in awe, like, how can you say these kind of things? And so I made a Brad Wilcox TikTok. And that one, I thought, wow, that one's got over 10,000 views. And then the lazy learner one, and you call for the lazy learner that you made, John, that was like, that's it. That's it. I'm going to get on and I'm going to speak up. I'm going to speak out because others had the courage to speak out. I'm going to do it. And if it helps somebody else, do it. And so I got on and I said, hey, Rusty, and it's probably inappropriate to call him Rusty, but it's Russ Lem Nelson, for those that don't know, the prophet of the church. I said,
Mormon church.
Mormon church. I said, lazy learner here. I said, 2 master's degrees, bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, certified nuclear engineer for the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, returned missionary, read the Book of Mormon over 40 times, Pearl of Great Price, Doctrine and Covenants many times, New Testament, Old Testament. I didn't say some of those things, but I went out and made a laundry list of items. I said, and you're right, I'm a lazy learner. And why? Because I failed to study the things I should have studied. The truth, the true history of the church, the anachronisms, the truth about Joseph Smith, the truth about how the history has been whitewashed, the truth about the Book of Abraham, the truth about, and I went on and on. And I said, you're right, I'm a lazy learner, but I'm a lazy learner no more because I'm studying the truth. And I'm going to help others to find and study the truth.
So we have some foreshadowing of the conversation to come. So we'll end this segment as its own, sort of like the life of a Mormon naval commander and his awesome partner. And what we're going to do now is we're going to end this one, and then we'll come right back, and we're going to have Britton and Mason tell their story of sons of a Mormon naval family who happen to be gay, and what their perspective has been like being raised in this family, realizing that they're gay as Mormon kids of a naval family, and then how they dealt with it. And it's equally epic. So come right back for part 2 of our amazing interview with the Laing family. Thanks so much, everyone. And thanks, Kara. It's always so great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara.
Yeah, thanks for having me so far.
And thanks, Kelly and Heather. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Beautiful. All right. Come right back for part 2.